These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Thom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. More info at teethhealth.com, code Thom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Thom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Thom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Thom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Thom.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice I said to the people, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human. Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. You are not welcome here, he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Dum Diversus would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Ra.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Well, we are moving toward a Joe Biden, Kamala Harris presidency, vice presidency, fairly steadily, which is, I suppose the good news. I think, along with a lot of other people, shocked that as many, mostly white people, went out and voted for Donald Trump as did, and other Republicans around the country who are still Trump humpers. I mean, it's all, in a way, very, very surprising. On the other hand, we're not really sure in some places exactly, what's going on with the ballots. And I'll get to that in a minute. But, just relax. Last night, a lot of people were freaking out. The media plays this game, right? Their business is holding you watching them, right? Their entire business model depends on you're not leaving that TV screen so that they can deliver commercials to you. And so they, the election is always decided in the United States by between a half a dozen and a dozen states. This year it's going to be around 12 states. It shouldn't be that way. I mean, already Joe Biden has several million more votes than Donald Trump. In fact, already Joe Biden has received more votes than any candidate for president of the United States in the history of the United States. Let that sink in. And yet, because we don't do majority rule for president in the United States, we have this electoral college loophole, and Democrats need to start referring to it as a loophole. People hate loopholes, and it is a loophole. It's a loophole in the election law that allows a person to become president without actually winning the majority of votes. And we got to do something about that. nationalpopularvote.com is a great place to start. But, that's what's going on, and that's where we're going to go. But I wanted to share some other thoughts with you. But, feel free to call on, anything election related today. If you want to vent, if you've got ideas, if you have concerns. I'll bring you up to date on the mail-in ballots and what's up with Louis DeJoy, and we'll do a state-by-state and all that kind of stuff in just a minute. But I think that there's a large issue here, the proverbial elephant in the room that nobody, of course, in the media is discussing. And it has to do with that old saying, own the media, own the country. And how tight this election is right now, I think absolutely proves that old saying. I mean, Democrats have been totally stupid when it comes to the information wars. The Republicans have built out an enormous national talk to every person in the country every single day, or be available to talk to them every hour, every day, all year long media infrastructure. And Democrats just pour money into advertising once every 4 years. And that's crazy. I mean, in the 1970s and 1980s, the conservatives looked at the media landscape. And keep in mind, I believe it was in the late 1970s, maybe it was the early 80s, when Alan Berg was assassinated. The nationally, well, he wasn't nationally syndicated. He was in a station in Denver that blew a signal out over 27 states. The #1 progressive talk show host in America, Alan Berg. And he was assassinated by two skinheads. And, a year or so later, Rush Limbaugh starts up. But, we used to have actually a fairly robust local progressive media across the United States. But as Limbaugh was taking off at the same time, or shortly thereafter, the media ownership rules got changed multiple times, actually, leading up to 96 and then after 96. And as a result of this, you've got these giant media monsters there is literally no place in America right now where you cannot turn on an AM radio or an FM radio, for that matter, in most cases, and hear right-wing hate radio. And yet, while Sirius XM is nationwide, a lot of people don't have Sirius XM. They listen to their AM or FM radio, and if you turn on your AM radio in most of America, certainly 95% of America, you cannot find progressive talk radio. And that's a problem, right? And the conservatives have built this huge infrastructure of think tanks that provide, a steady stream of articles and columns and all that kind of stuff, promoting tax cuts for the rich and trickle-down economics and deregulation of polluting and banking and polluting industries and banking and all this kind of stuff. And now they've built out, they own literally hundreds, maybe thousands of radio stations, hundreds of television stations, hundreds of websites that purport to be news websites, and are on a daily basis, these think tanks, at least one of these think tanks that I know of, editing Wikipedia and other public source websites. And now they're expanding this to Spanish language stuff in a big way. And we're seeing the results of that in this election, this investment, this huge investment about 6 or 8 years ago in Spanish language radio stations around the country. Now, the Democratic effort to build out media was Air America Radio. Air America started in 2005, died in 2010. Air America helped put Barack Obama in the White House. And I don't know why Democrats don't remember this. But Air America was a major force in the 2008 election, and Air America had an awful lot to do with why Barack Obama became president in 2008. And 2 years later, the people who had been funding that, the big donor Democrats, the Democracy Alliance and groups like that, they were like, well, if they can't stand on their own 2 feet, screw them. And they walked away. Meanwhile, Rupert Murdoch was shoveling cash into Fox News, knowing that eventually he'd get a good return. But Air America died in 2010, and now basically in 90% of America, all you can hear is conservative talk radio. And then the conservatives went to Facebook and Google and lobbied them and harassed them until basically these two groups changed their algorithms to downrank progressive news sites. As a result of this, Mother Jones took a huge hit, The Nation took a huge hit. Alternate, they ended up selling themselves. It was a nonprofit organization. They sold themselves to a new owner. He's done a great job with it, but, it's a crisis. I mean, they're having to do it on a subscription model now because their traffic is down so much. And yet at the same time, Google and Facebook are promoting right-wing websites like the Daily Caller and whatnot that are part of this, right-wing media. We had a host on the other day, Ann Nelson, I believe her name was, who wrote this book, Shadow Network, who was saying basically it was a right-wing conspiracy. A bunch of billionaires got together and did this. And so if Democrats don't get their media act together, and I talked to Tom Steyer about this on the air yesterday, and I said, hey, are you guys going to invest in media? And he was like, no. Then, we've got a serious problem. This hard right narrative that is being promoted to Americans all across the country, particularly in rural areas. You flip on the radio in a rural area, and all you can hear is right-wing talk radio, religious talk radio, which is increasingly politicized, and in many places, country music, which is also increasingly politicized. And none of that is an accident. This is all the result of massive investments by right-wing billionaires who want to control this country. And they're pulling it off. So anyway, take a breath and don't panic. There are over 1 million votes in Pennsylvania that have not been counted. This is according to the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania. Right now in Pennsylvania, Trump leads by 700,000 votes. There are 1.4 million ballots that have not been counted, and the mail-in ballots right now, Biden is winning by 78 to 21%. So if that's true, then Biden's going to get 800,000 votes out of that, and this according to Nate Cohn, and this is that's easily enough to take Pennsylvania. He's on the verge of Wisconsin and Michigan, Biden. I think this is going to work out just fine. Not so much for the Senate, but we'll see.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And even the Senate is still possible. Remember 2 years ago, the election, we all thought the day after the election, oh my God, how we do so badly? And then 2 weeks later, we were like, whoa, we really did well. And welcome back. Beverly in Los Angeles. Hey, Beverly, what's up?
Oh, hi, Tom, and thank you so much for everything you do. Last night when I was watching returns coming in, I know when they got to Miami-Dade, I was watching back between Free Speech TV and MSNBC. I went back and forth. And, both like Amy and then on MSNBC, they're like, oh, Miami-Dade has so few of votes, well, they're all sitting in boxes in the post office there.
Right. It's looking like as much as 27%. 27% was the number that was reported a couple of hours ago, and now some of the news media is kind of walking back from that 27%. But it looks like there are a substantial number of ballots for Miami-Dade and presumably Broward as well that were simply never delivered, and they had to have been delivered by 3 or 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon, whatever the time cutoff was for Florida. It varies from state to state. But it is one of those states where they have to be delivered by election day. And, they're going to be coming in today and tomorrow and the next day. And, if they come in at all. So, yeah, I'm with you, Beverly. This is Louis DeJoy needs to be in jail.
Yes, absolutely.
And we're going to find out here if Judge Emmett Sullivan has the courage of his convictions. It's very rare that a federal official is held in contempt of court, criminal contempt of court, which is what it would take. But it is possible. We'll see how that shakes out. Omar, thank you for the call. Omar in Herndon, Virginia. Hey, Omar, what's up?
Tom, thank you so much for taking my call. No need to panic. We are going to win. I'm going to tell you a story. John Buchanan told Richard Milhouse Nixon, he always called Milhouse by his middle name. He told him, look, the country is divided, but we have the bigger half. Fast forward now. The country is divided, and we have the bigger half. So no need to panic. And all we have to focus on is these mail-in ballots, make sure that they don't get eliminated. All that 1,000 lawyers team, we want to make sure they're activated and every ballot counted. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, Florida finished early counting, but Pennsylvania did not. I mean, what's the issue there? I don't understand. I thought they started counting at the same time.
Yeah, there are two factors. There are several counties in Pennsylvania that are controlled. The individual counties control the election processes in Pennsylvania. And so you've got a half a dozen or more counties, a couple of them fairly good size, but I mean, they're not as big as Philadelphia, but you've got a bunch of counties that simply said, we're not going to start counting mail-in ballots until Wednesday, till today. And so they're just starting today. And they're doing this as part of Trump's strategy of, making it look like Trump is winning the election. The mail-in ballots will be mostly for Biden. In fact, they're running 78% for Biden in Pennsylvania. And the mail-in ballots will come in later. And if we can hold those mail-in ballots off as long as possible during that time when it looks like Trump is ahead, he can declare victory, and we can kind of repeat Florida in 2000. The reason that they're coming in slow out of Philadelphia and Detroit, frankly, for that matter, is that, for years and years and years, black parts of the United States that are heavily African American, have had their election infrastructure essentially not well funded. Both the Pennsylvania and the Michigan legislatures, which control the funding for all this stuff, are still controlled by Republicans. And so they have antiquated election systems and structures, and it takes time to get things done. It's sad, but that's the case. Omar, thanks for the call. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, we have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com for people who support our program. It's astonishing. Just think about this. This year alone, with this one source of revenue, according to Senator Bernie Sanders, quote, this year alone, we could fund tuition-free college for all, eliminate child hunger, ensure clean drinking water for every American household, build 500,000 affordable housing units, provide face masks for everybody, produce the protective gear and medical supplies our health workers need for the pandemic, and fully fund the U.S. Post Office. Now, what is this magical thing that we could do that would produce enough money to do all these things? Fund the Internal Revenue Service. Republicans have cut its funding so badly since 2010 that fully a third of their enforcement is no longer happening. And tax cheats have walked off, or they're basically refusing to pay over $260 billion in taxes this year. You can hear the whole thing over at ThomHartmann.com. Back, Thom Hartmann here with you. I started to, as I was doing my opening rant here, I started to go down another tangent and then decided that, I'd come back to it. It really wasn't that important because it was kind of off the main point I was making. But it had to do with last night. I want to make this point very, very clearly. I started out pointing out that the television network's business model is keep people watching. Keep people watching so you can deliver ads that will make money for the networks. That's their first imperative. It's not the truth, it's not the news, it's not what's factual, it's keep people watching. And so we know that a dozen or so states are going to decide the election because of the Electoral College. But the states that come in first are not the states that are going to decide the election. And the media last night, I was hysterical to watch because they were like, oh my God, look at this. Look at Florida. Maybe he'll take Florida. Oh, Georgia. Maybe these are not states that are in play, or if they are in play, it'll be a big deal and it'll be in a blowout election. But they're not states that are in play in a big way. Oh, look at that. Indiana just went to Donald Trump, and people are going, oh no. We hadn't gotten to the battleground states yet. At around 10:30 Eastern time last night, I just said, screw this. Nothing more is going to come in until tomorrow morning. We're not going to know the result of this election until probably Wednesday afternoon and maybe Thursday afternoon. But in my mind, it's obviously going to be Joe Biden. And so I sent out a tweet that said, I'm going to go do something a little more pleasurable than watching this. So I'll let you know when I'm done with when my dentist is done with me. And that's how I was feeling. Like watching this is like having your teeth drilled. I'd rather do something else. And so Louise and I went to bed. It was like, okay, it's our bedtime anyway. So, you know, that's what's up with that. But there's some really fascinating stuff going on. Number one, you all know I've been on Donald Trump's mailing list since 2015 when I sent him $5. And I have gotten more than 20 fundraising appeals from the Trump campaign and from super PACs associated with it that he has sold my name to in the past 24 hours. More than 20 of them. And one of the things that I find really interesting, and I got one just about 10 minutes ago from Trump, you know, Democrats want to steal this election. And I thought, I wonder how they're, you know, when you click on the, you know, yes, I want to save the, you know, Democracy in America link, where does it take you? So I clicked on it. And it takes you to a Donate to Donald Trump page. And about halfway down that page, there are two little boxes that are pre-clicked. And in large type, now keep in mind, why 20 of these things? Because he is sucking dry the suckers who follow him and send him money. He is sucking them dry. He's getting ready for after he's no longer president. I mean, you know, we know, you know, there's a fair amount of evidence now that at least $300 million out of the $1 billion that the Trump campaign has raised has gone into someplace, right? It has vanished. It's unaccountable for. $340 million. And I'm guessing it's either in Donald Trump's pocket or in some bank account he's going to use for his next adventure. And I think he's doing this is continuing, right? Those numbers are from a month ago. But anyhow, there's these two pre-checked boxes. And one says, in large type, the Democrats want to steal this election. There will be fraud like you've never seen. Plain and simple. We need your help to ensure we have the resources to protect the results and keep fighting even after Election Day. Don't wait. Step up now to defend the integrity of our election. And then in very small type that is not bold, underneath that, this is a checkbox that's pre-checked. In very small type that's not bold, it says, make this a weekly recurring donation until December 14th. And then there's another one right below it that's also checked that says, defend the election. The radical left is going to do whatever it takes and try to rip another Republican victory away from you. We need to fight back. Please make another contribution right now that will automatically process on November 6th. And then it says, in a little tiny type underneath that, donate an additional $20 automatically on 11/6, which of course will become an automatic donation all the way up to December 14th every week. Plus, they're going to charge your credit card for whatever you already gave. And I don't think people are realizing this. I don't think Trump followers, supporters, Trump humpers are realizing that when they make a donation to Trump, and this has been going on for as well as I could tell for about a week and a half, that they're going to make a donation and it's going to be a recurring donation, whether they want it or not. The Wisconsin Commissioner of Elections, Megan Wolf, has just tweeted, all of the ballots have been counted. Joe Biden is ahead by 20,697 votes. So I've got to, during the break here, I'm going to check the New York Times and see if they've called it for Wisconsin yet. Sonny Perdue is only 0.8% above 50% in Georgia. So there may be a runoff election there. Warnock is going to be in the same runoff election. Susan Collins, we don't know what's going on there, but looks like, you know, this is ranked choice voting in Maine. So we'll see. And in North Carolina, nobody's calling the Senate race, at least so far. So I'm going to update myself on election results during the break. I'll pick that up on the other side of this break, fill you in, and pick up your calls. So stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And we haven't even started talking about Louis DeJoy and all these missing ballots that Judge Emmett Sullivan is so upset about. We'll be back.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Beyond the Valley by Ramesh Srinivasan. This is from Chapter 1, The Power of Data. In November 2017, my Apple MacBook Pro was stolen. It happened on the island of Ibiza, where I was visiting my friend, a documentary filmmaker. We were thinking of making a series of short films to illustrate innovative uses of new technology around the world. We sat together writing down examples of technological innovation, subversion, and creativity we'd already witnessed. We discussed themes I explore in this book, such as surveillance, the gig economy, and the future of work, artificial intelligence, and cryptocurrencies. After uploading our ideas to Google's cloud-based storage platform, Google Drive, we took a short break, locking our laptops in the trunk of our rented car. When we returned, both laptops were gone. Although upset, I was also relieved. I'd be able to recover most of my data because almost all of it was in the cloud. That was what I signed onto when I stored my files with Google as well as with Apple, Microsoft, and Dropbox. But in the bargain, I'd allowed them to profit from my data. It dawned on me, given the terms of service I'd agreed to, that the value of the data of my data to the storage companies was far greater than the value of my laptop to the thief. How many of us are fully aware that companies providing us with cloud storage have ways to monetize our data? They use targeted advertising, for instance, and charge fees once we get hooked on the security and peace of mind that their free services offer. We put faith in these companies to store our files securely, but our private information may no longer remain private if, let's say, the government asks to search through our data. It's also not private because all this data is surveilled, computed, and often manipulated in mysterious ways to influence and shape our behaviors as these corporations see fit. By creating accounts with these companies, we give them access to ourselves. So when we consent to privacy policies, in reality, we're signing on to systems of surveillance never before seen in human history, and we do so without being included or consulted. By desiring to keep our data accessible and recoverable, we lock ourselves into using their services. As I thought about getting my files back in Ibiza, I wondered, does access to my own property have to come with such strings attached? In my relationship to Apple, I find the strings impossible to untie. By purchasing an Apple laptop, I had unwittingly transformed from a customer into a part of the company's product line. I had provided Apple with private data and trusted Apple to protect it. Now, to retrieve that data, I had to purchase a new laptop with Apple-owned peripherals and devices. So I caught the next flight to Madrid. I then took the train to the city's Apple store located in Puerto del Sol. In many ways, this central plaza still serves in its centuries-old role as a landmark and gathering place for the entire Spanish nation, a point from which numerous roads emanate. With its distinctive aesthetic and its strategic placement in a civic space, the Apple Store stood out among the adjacent parliamentary and government buildings as if the global brand were more powerful than Spain itself. The day I was there, more people entered and left the Apple Store than passed through the doors of my neighboring building. In 2017, Apple, a private corporation worth more than $1 trillion, actually began to conceptualize its retail stores as town squares, thereby branding itself an integral part of our everyday lives. Other big technology corporations describe themselves in similar terms. Facebook CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, refers to the company as a social infrastructure for the global community. So what we have in the digital world are privately owned public spheres. They're branded as public, civic, and virtuous, but in reality are dominated by a single logic, extending profitability and economic value. How can these companies' interests be the same as the public interest? Like many other large corporations, Apple is shareholder-owned and therefore primarily accountable to its investors and executives, rather than to its employees, customers, or the general public. I had not begun to unpack the meaning of all this until I realized how monumental the Puerto del Sol Apple Store actually was, as an icon and a structure. As I walked into the store, an Apple employee invited me to purchase a new machine, log on to my iCloud account, and retrieve from Apple Cloud Storage the data that I lost from my stolen laptop. These transactions, completed in less than an hour, were simple and efficient. My data was extraterritorial, easily retrievable in Spain, and likely would be in most other countries. Purchasing a new laptop and getting my data back supported Apple's economic model. National borders were no threat or hindrance. The same was true with retrieving data I had stored on other corporate cloud servers managed by Google and Dropbox. In technology circles, this saying has made the rounds. If you're not the customer, then you're the product. Many of today's technologies come to us for free, but in return, our personal lives come for free to these technologies. but they are accessible for the company's profit and gain. Yes, when we search Google, we look for information, but do we realize that Google is also searching us? Users, and it goes on from there. So the book is Beyond the Valley by Ramesh Srinivasan.
On the Science Revolution this week, how a Green New Deal could save hundreds of thousands of lives. Also, Dr. Justin Frank submitted an amicus brief to the Supreme Court on Bush v. Gore and is talking about psychoanalytic and family dynamic perspective in that context. I weigh in on how the GOP is an organized gang of sociopaths. Meet the 14-year-old climate activist Haven Coleman. She'll be discussing how youth climate activists are leading the push for climate action in the Democratic Party and why they believe voting for climate in 2020 is so critical. And in Geeky Science, why healthcare for all is a climate solution. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just checked the Times and the Post and, the online sources for which races have been called for whom. And so far, no change. People are still waiting for the official word from Wisconsin. I guess the tweet doesn't suffice. But it looks like Wisconsin is solidly Joe Biden. Maine, 3 out of the 4 electoral votes in Maine have been called for Joe Biden. I think this is moving in Joe Biden's direction. I think it's fairly clear it is. Meanwhile, the U.S. Postal Service, the initial headline, as U.S. Postal Service failed to deliver 27% of mail-in ballots in South Florida. I retweeted that story. This is based on John Cruzel's reporting from The Hill, and he's got the spreadsheets and whatnot to prove it. The 27%, now there are folks who are saying, well, wait a minute, it's maybe not that high. And so, if you're looking at my Twitter feed, take that with a grain of salt, that 27%. It may not be that high because in response to that judge's order, the post office started pushing ballots out without running them through the scanning machines that caused them to be verified as having been delivered. So there may have been more ballots delivered than we know for sure. But it sure looks like there's still a lot of ballots in Florida. We'll find out. This stuff is going to come out. And again, I would remind you, 2 years ago in 2018, the day after the election, we were sitting around on this program talking about, geez, how did we do so badly? And then as the mail-in votes were coming in and as the urban areas were coming in, and we were like, whoa, we really actually kind of blew out that election. And this is pretty straightforward stuff. And you've got some places like, some of those counties in Pennsylvania where that are controlled by partisan Republicans. The election apparatus is controlled by partisan Republicans who are saying we aren't even going to count the mail-in votes until the day after the election because that'll make it look like Trump is ahead and it'll play into his narrative. But the larger issue, I think, is, answering the question, why is it that there are always long lines in black neighborhoods and in Hispanic neighborhoods? And why is it that it takes a longer time for these urban areas to report their vote? And of course, the implication, the implied answer to that question that you will hear on Right Wing Hate Radio is, oh, those black people, they just don't know how to do things. And the implication of that is, oh, they're just dumb or something like that, which is just like this most insanely racist meme. But, white America has just accepted this for decades. Oh, yeah, I guess that must be what it is. No, it's because, Detroit is coming in slow because their election systems are old and antiquated and they're not well funded. Why is that? Well, because the Republicans control the purse strings in Michigan. They control the legislature. The same thing in Georgia. State after state where you've got large cities that are coming in really late, you will find that the election systems in those cities has been radically underfunded over the years. It's not, by and large, happening in blue states that fund election systems well. So, it's just more racism and discrimination and everything else. So, anyhow, let's pick up your phone calls. Jenny in Miami Beach, Florida. Hey, Jenny, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm calling you from Miami. So yeah, I have to agree with a lot of the things that you're saying today, and I just wanted to point out, like, this whole thing. It's twofold, basically. It's the Spanish media in this country, the Spanish-speaking media in this country. It's fear mongers. It keeps people informed about what's going on in their countries and doesn't really inform them about the electoral process here and what's actually going on here in the country in which they live now. And it consistently promotes conservative candidates. Case in point. Maria Salazar, who is beating Donna Shalala, our Democratic U.S. House representative here, is currently beaten by 9,000 points by Salazar, who was a former Univision reporter and, was involved in kind of like heading up the debates for Univision here in Miami when they happened in like 2016. So she's basically, just someone of the media. And then Jimenez beat here in Florida, another U.S. House race. So we're going from having 13 seats to 11 seats if these two numbers hold. On top of the fact, I just want to say that the reason they lost South Florida is the Democrats lost South Florida is this whole socialism fear-mongering that they've been doing for years. They basically dug their own grave starting way back in 2016 when they insisted on labeling Bernie Sanders a socialist. They did this. This was their messaging, and all Trump had to do was come on and grab onto the fear of all of like the Cubans and the Venezuelans, and just come and grab onto that and just take their vote. And it was just really easy. And I think that it was part of the Democratic Party's fault is their messaging, and like unfortunately, like they dug their own graves in that area.
Yeah, I think you're right. And if you look at the ownership of these Spanish language stations around the country, many of them are now increasingly owned by large networks that have right-wing agendas, much as we saw with, when Mitt Romney's Bain Capital took over Clear Channel right around 2000. I forget which year it was, but or 2010, I was going to say. Then what did Clear Channel do? They started dumping progressive programming left and right and started increasing the amount of right-wing programming that they have. And to think that these giant media corporations are not political is naive. So Jenny, thank you.
I tweeted that the other day. I tweeted that the other day. We need more progressive media. And Spanish-speaking progressive media. We need it on YouTube. We need it in writing. We need it in print and on radio. And we need smart, intelligent people to get out there and talk and educate and inform.
I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. And the problem is that, at least with regard to media, with radio and television, it's a matter of money. And, the left-wing billionaires have not been paying attention to this, with a very few exceptions. And the right-wing billionaires have been all over this since the 1980s. Jenny, thank you. Spot on, everything you said. Edward in San Antonio. Hey, Edward, what's up?
I just want to also piggyback on the last caller. The dress the poor showing in Miami. Can we just kind of dissect this concept of the Hispanic vote? I can only use example here in San Antonio. The Hispanics here, they call themselves Tex-Mex. So they're not going to be identifying with the Hispanics in California who refer themselves as Chicanos. So they consume the same amount of right-wing Fox News hate radio, as you've stated, as their white counterparts. They breathe it. They basically look at themselves as white people with brown tans. For no offense, but that's how they kind of look at it. I can tell you that they do not relate to children in cages, even if there are children of Hispanic or Latino descent, because that's not they don't look at this. That's their children. While I have more affinity towards those children in cages, they do not. I can only say that it's. I think Joy Reid from MSNBC described it correctly. I think we as a country, we're more like Donald Trump than we realize. After 4 years of children in cages, impeachment, proving that he had connection with the Russians, Americans, 50% went out and voted for him. What does that say about us? I know we want to sit here and look at the right side. Even if Biden wins, how is he going to govern? We can pretty much put that whole reform ACA off this table. That's not going to happen. Yeah. Okay. And one more thing, we
Edward, if I could just speak to what you just said first, and then your one more thing. Very quickly. If you listen to Spanish language media in Texas, one of the things, Spanish language talk radio, one of the messages that you're going to hear as they're talking to fellow Hispanics is, you're in America, you got yours, you may be first generation, you may not even be here legally, but they're speaking mostly to the voters. So you may be first generation, you're still speaking Spanish, you're here, you're working hard, you're out there doing roofing every day or whatever it may be, and there's all these people from south of the border who want to come steal your job and work for less than you. And which is the old message. I mean, this was the message they were pitching in the 40s and 50s and 60s to white people about black people. And then they started pitching it to black people about Hispanic people, about, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And now they're pitching it to Hispanic people about immigrants. And it's just the same old, racist, they want your job stuff. Back to you, Edward. We got 30 seconds.
I just want to say that we're going to have to organize. We need an infrastructure. I just stated earlier, from a more liberal side, where you get that information out. We need those who have the money to step up, because those with the biggest microphone are going to always be the ones that people are going to listen to. And we need to, I'm talking about the left-wing billionaires. They need to step their game up. And we need to stop this coming in, I'm going to extend my hands. We need to stop that. Take care.
Yeah, this is war. Edward, thank you. Thank you very much. Spot on every point you made. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We're kind of processing the election today. So I'll be with you here all 3 hours and taking your calls and keeping you up to date as anything happens with regard to the election. But I think we all need to just take a deep breath here. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's your media support group for we the people of the United States, the Thom Hartmann Program, back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Dennis in Aptos, California. Hey, Dennis, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Tom. And thanks for everything you do. But I want to bring up these small population states and how they are so overrepresented. Now, I do not remember offhand how many people had to live in a territory before that territory became a state. What was it, 50,000, 100,000? Whatever it was.
At the time that Abraham Lincoln made Nevada a state, the threshold was 130,000, and the population of Nevada at that time was 7,000. But he needed another state. He needed 2 more Republican senators, and so he did it. And when Ulysses Grant, I believe it was, I might be wrong on that, it might have been somebody later, might have been Harrison, made North and South Dakota 2 states. It was still 130,000 for one state, and the population of those 2 states, I'm doing this from memory, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. It's in my book on voting. The population of those 2 states combined was around 70 or 80,000, something in that neighborhood. So, but they needed 4 Republican senators, and so they got them. And this is why we need to make Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico states.
Well, I have
another
suggestion. And that would be to actually amalgamate some of these states that have very few people, like North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana, make that all one state. And, the Republicans are all for less government. Well, there you're getting rid of 4 state governments to have one. Now, they would howl and scream about that, the Republicans and the right wing and conservatives. But how about splitting California in 2 then, to even things up there? You could do it right at the San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara County line, because I can't remember the inland counties, Kern County maybe. That line, I think, goes all the way across the state to Nevada. It would be a very easy cut of the state. So it's, I don't know if that could ever happen, that you could amalgamate some of the smaller states into one, but that would, I believe, help solve the problem, because D.C., I hope it could become a state. I know Puerto Rico, in this election, there was a referendum about making it into a state, and I believe it had over 50%. But who knows if Puerto Rico would ever become a state.
This was yesterday? This was on the ballot yesterday in Puerto Rico?
I heard that on Amy Goodman, Democracy Now!, earlier today.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Again, I don't know if the Dakotas and Montana and Wyoming would want to turn into one state.
They
but,
don't, and they won't.
What else can you do?
Yeah. Just adding D.C. As a starting point. D.C. has a larger population than Wyoming. So I believe D.C. has a larger population than Vermont. I believe D.C. is a little over 800,000 and Vermont's a little over 600,000. Those numbers are probably a decade old. But this is something that we should be seriously talking about, and it's something the Democrats need to be focusing on. It is going to require controlling the Senate. I mean, it takes a lot to make a state.
We could have,
and the Republicans are going to fight it.
We could have New England become all one state then, maybe. Or split it up.
That wouldn't be good
New
for
England
us.
And North New England.
That would not be good for us. But I get what you're saying, Dennis. I just, it's not going to happen. So, I think that what we need to be looking at is a media strategy rather than a geography strategy. But I'm all in favor of both. Dennis, thank you for the call. It's 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be shortly. Stick around. We'll be right back. The hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment tells how the Second Amendment was written to protect Georgia's slave patrols. Did you know that there have been 8 federal judges who have been convicted and removed from the federal bench? 15 altogether have been impeached. 8 have been removed from office since the beginning. 3 of them since 1988, including one judge, Thomas Porteous down in Louisiana, who was impeached and removed from office for signing false financial declarations under penalty of perjury, which it turns out it looks like Clarence Thomas did for quite a number of years when he did not disclose, as he is required by law to do, that his wife was taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Heritage Foundation. That and his perjury around Anita Hill and others, there were numerous witnesses that didn't even get called, could legitimately spark an impeachment of Clarence Thomas. We got a video about this over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. Check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. John in St. Mary's, Idaho.
Yes, sir. Hey, I had to laugh at your last caller saying to get the states together like that. Because the bureaucracy of doing that would take how many decades to get over all that crap. And not only that, Washington State has been wanting to do the same thing. Eastern Washington has been wanting to divide between Western Washington because of Olympia. That's where the power is, the money, everything else. So that's not going to happen. But it was nice to hear.
We've had the same conversation here in Oregon.
Idea.
There's a secession movement too for Eastern Oregon. It's very right wing, and they want to split off. So, but back to you.
So anyway, what I'm calling in about is that if Trump wins his presidency, I have an article here. It's called "Civil Servants: The Coming Trump Purge," and here's what it says: President Trump is paving the way for mass firings of civil service servants if he wins the second term, said Lori Garnett in CNN.com. Last week, Trump signed...
John, you don't need to read it. We discourage people from reading on the air, but you're absolutely right. And he signed an executive order to make this possible 2 weeks ago, which reorganized the civil service so that people who are professionals, people who are like, heads of agencies or senior officers in agencies who may be scientists, maybe researchers, they've worked there for 10, 20, 30 years, NOAA, NASA, the CDC, et cetera. These professional, full-time, long-time civil servant scientists and whatnot, under his executive order, no longer have civil service protection. So they can be fired in an instant and replaced with a political appointee who is simply a Trump toady. He's preparing to do, if he gets reelected, he's going to do what Viktor Orban did in Hungary, which is strip all the professionals out of his government and replace them all with cronies and toadies.
Right. He wants nothing but yes people.
Exactly.
Bottom line.
Exactly. And And it's a danger, frankly, to democracy. I don't know how to say it. It's a danger to democracy. John, thanks for the call, and thanks for pointing that out. Brett in Chicago. Hey, Brett, what's on your mind today?
Hi there. So not to harp on the Miami County, but I feel like the numbers are fascinating and not in a good way. When I was watching last night, it seemed that Clinton had, going back to 2016, Clinton had 624,000 votes and Trump had 333,000. But even with turnout up all over the country, this year Biden is only at 617, which is down 2%, and Trump is at 532,000, which is up 59%. Like, the math doesn't even add up.
It's because the ballots have not been delivered. It's because they're sitting in the post office.
Even though the news blurb said that it had delivered every delayed ballot?
No, the post office has not delivered every delayed ballot. Nobody is asserting that. The debate is, are there a few hundred ballots still sitting in the post office, or are there a few 100,000? And
right.
Nobody's really sure down in Florida. I mean, the official numbers that the post office has put out, for this, I refer you over to dailycoz.com or rawstory.com. Both of them have pretty good stories about this, but the numbers that the post office has put out seem to indicate that there are tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of South Florida ballots that have not been delivered. But those numbers may or may not be accurate because the post office is saying that in response to Judge Sullivan's order, they stopped tracking a lot of mail in order to just physically deliver it to the ballot counting places very, very quickly. So, we'll see. This is a story that is still that's in process, that is shaking out. So we'll see where it goes.
Absolutely. Thanks for all you do.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to hear from you. Thank you very much. Don in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Don, what's up?
Hey, just one quick question. Are you familiar with subliminal advertising?
Oh yeah, I remember Vance Packard back in the day. Yes.
Yeah, were they in the show where they used to put the one little snippet of popcorn or pop
Yep.
or candy in between on the film? They used to cut it into the film, and it would go by so fast that you would never see it on the film, but your subconscious mind would pick it up, and all of a sudden you wanted popcorn.
That's not what's going on here,
Don. They would sell more popcorn.
That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is that every day, all across America, millions of people are turning on their radios and listening to right-wing hate radio and believing what's being told to them. Every day across this country, millions of people are turning on Fox News and listening to the sales pitch and believing what's being said to them. And everywhere all around the country, people are logging into Facebook. And frankly, I think Facebook is the biggest piece of this. People are logging onto Facebook and being sucked into right-wing vortexes. I mean, their algorithm, if you even like one single right-wing meme, you're going to start getting more right-wing memes, and then you start liking them, and now you're getting nothing but right-wing memes, and now you're not even seeing left-wing memes anymore. I mean, Facebook basically just channels people into either you're a hardcore right-winger or you're a hardcore left-winger, and they've got some slicing and dicing in between, but it's somewhat modest. And it just amplifies it. It pounds people into their belief systems. And that's what's going on. Don, I'm as concerned as you are about the integrity of our advertising infrastructure and how advertising works and the power of advertising to influence things and people. But I don't think that's it. Yes, a lot of dark money advertising may have helped, but I don't think that's it. We'll be back. Stick around. It's coming up on the top of the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Tom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code Tom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Tom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Tom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM.
We say fight back!
We're reading today from a book by David Sanger, the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times national security reporter. The title of the book is The Perfect Weapon: War, Sabotage, and Fear in the Cyber Age. We're reading from the preface. A year into Donald J. Trump's presidency, his defense secretary, Jim Mattis, sent the new commander-in-chief a startling recommendation. With nations around the world threatening to use cyber weapons to bring down America's power grids, cell phone networks, and water supplies, Trump should declare that he's ready to take extraordinary steps to protect the country. If any nation hit America's critical infrastructure with a devastating strike, even a non-nuclear one, it should be forewarned that the United States might reach for a nuclear weapon in response. Like most things in Washington, the recommendation leaked immediately. Excuse me. Many declared it a crazy idea and wild overkill. While nations had turned their cyber weapons against each other dozens of times in recent years, no attack had yet proven to cost a human life, at least directly. Not the American attacks on Iran's and North Korea's weapon programs, not the North Korean attacks on American banks, a famed Hollywood studio, and the British healthcare system, not the Russian attacks in Ukraine, Europe, and then at the core of American democracy. That streak of luck was certain to end soon. But why should Donald Trump or any of his successors take the huge risk of escalating a cyber war by going nuclear? The Pentagon's recommendation, it turned out, was the prelude to other proposals delivered to a president who values toughness and America first to use the nation's powerful cyber weapons far more aggressively. But it was also a reminder of how quickly the fear of devastating cyber attacks has moved from the stuff of science fiction and die-hard movies to the center of American defense strategy. Just over a decade before, in 2007, cyber attacks were missing entirely from the global threat assessment that intelligence agencies prepare each year for Congress. Terrorism topped that list, along with other post-9/11 concerns. Now that hierarchy has been reversed. For several years, a variety of cyber threats, ranging from a paralyzing strike on the nation's cities to a sophisticated effort to undercut public confidence in its institutions, has appeared as the nation's #1 threat on the list. Not since the Soviets tested the bomb in 1949 had the perception of threats facing the nation been revised so quickly. Yet Mattis, who had risen to 4-star status in a career focused in the Middle East, feared that the 2 decades spent chasing al-Qaeda and ISIS around the globe had distracted America from its most potent challenges. Great power competition, not terrorism, is now the primary focus of U.S. national security, he said in early 2018. America's, quote, competitive edge has eroded in every domain of warfare, including the newest one, cyberspace. The nuclear strategy he handed Trump gave voice to an inchoate fear among many in the Pentagon that cyber attacks posed a threat unlike any other, one that we had completely failed to deter. The irony is that the United States remains the world's stealthiest, most skillful cyber power, as the Iranians discovered when their centrifuges spun out of control, and the North Koreans suspected as their missiles fell out of the sky. But the gap is closing. Cyber weapons are so cheap to develop and so easy to hide that they've proven irresistible. And American officials are discovering that in a world in which almost everything is connected, phones, cars, electrical grids, and satellites, everything can be disrupted, if not destroyed. For several years, the thinking inside the Pentagon was that only nations with nuclear weapons could threaten America's existence. Now that assumption is in doubt. In almost every classified Pentagon scenario for how a future confrontation with Russia and China, or even Iran and North Korea might play out, The adversary's first strike against the United States would include a cyber barrage aimed at civilians. It would fry power grids, stop trains, silence cell phones, and overwhelm the internet. In the worst-case scenarios, food and water would begin to run out. Hospitals would turn people away. Separated from their electronics and thus their connections, Americans would panic and turn against one another. The Pentagon is now planning for this scenario because it knows many of its own war plans open with similarly paralyzing cyber attacks against our adversaries, reflecting new strategies to try to win wars before a shot is fired. Glimpses of what this would look like have leaked out in recent years, thanks partly to Edward J. Snowden, partly because of a mysterious group called the Shadow Brokers, suspected of close links to Russian intelligence, obtained terabytes of data containing many of the tools that the National Security Agency used to breach foreign computer networks. It didn't take long for some of those stolen cyber weapons to be shot back at America and its allies in attacks whose bizarre-sounding names, like WannaCry, suddenly appear in the headlines every week. Yet the secrecy surrounding these programs obscures most public debate about the wisdom of using them or the risks inherent in losing control of them. The government's silence about America's new arsenal and its implications poses a sharp contrast to the first decades of the nuclear era. The horrific scenes of destruction at Hiroshima and Nagasaki not only seared the national psyche, but made America's destructive capabilities, and soon Russia's and China's, obvious and undeniable. Yet even while the government kept the details classified, how to build atomic weapons, where they are stored, and who has the authority to order their launch, America engaged in a decades-long political debate about when to threaten to use the bomb and whether to ban it. The book, The Perfect Weapon by David E. Sanger.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, Trump is trying to sow discord. Of course, he claimed that he had won last night, and then he said, we got to stop the vote. Well, we did stop the vote at the end of the day. And then he said, well, we got to stop counting the vote. No, that ain't going to happen. Now, he just a few minutes ago said, there's irregularities in Wisconsin. This is because Wisconsin is obviously going for Joe Biden. He wants an immediate recount, right? Over at Fox News, they're starting to talk about what is voter intent. Now, why are they saying that? Well, because in some cases, mail-in ballots, a lot of people are voting for the first time by mail-in ballot all across the country. We've been doing it here in Oregon for 20 years. 20 years. No problems. It works great. We have a Republican Secretary of State who administers our elections. The Democrat won in yesterday's election, but, up until January, we've got a Republican Secretary of State who does a fine job of administering our elections here in Oregon. All vote by mail. It works just fine. But the thing about vote by mail is that when people who have never voted before get vote by mail, sometimes they don't quite know what to do, and they don't always read the directions carefully. People are in a hurry. People are trying to get to work. People are freaked out. People are, whatever. And so, there's this little bubble that you're supposed to fill in with a black pen. Well, some people put an X through the bubble as a way of saying, yes, this is it, or put a check mark in it. Well, the machine will kick that out as an unreadable ballot. Or sometimes they'll, fill in the bubble for the candidate that they like, and then in the write in a name thing below that, they'll write in the name of the same person. Again, it'll get kicked out of the voting, the scanner that's counting the votes. So then it goes to a couple of people, typically a Republican and a Democrat election. These are, I'm not sure that their title is poll watchers, but election officials, election judges. And they will decide whether or not that ballot should be counted or considered spoiled. It's so screwed up that we just can't count it. And if it will be counted, who the vote goes to. And so, on a lot of these ballots, there's a check mark or an X rather than a filled-in bubble. And they're sitting there going, well, I think that we should give this to the person whose box they checked. Well, over at Fox News, they're starting to say, well, should we be doing that? And the reason why, of course, is because there's all these new mail-in ballots coming from all across the country, mostly from Democrats who took COVID seriously the Republicans who are not taking COVID seriously showed up at the polls yesterday. And we know this bifurcation has happened. It's weird if this was an electoral strategy, by the way, just to go off on a tangent for a moment here. But that's why Fox News is doing this. They're trying to cast doubt on the legitimacy of the count of the mail-in ballots, right? But think about this for a second. Democrats have been following the science and believing the science, and they're more reluctant to vote in person. Republicans have been believing the lies, the Trump lies, and the right-wing hate radio and Fox News lies that say that the coronavirus is just like the flu and no big deal, and it's a Democratic hoax, and it's going to go away after November 4th. Remember Trump predicted on November 4th, all these he calls them Democrat states because he's following Joe McCarthy's old shtick of never say Democratic. That sounds too nice. Always say Democrat with emphasis on the rat. But anyhow, Trump is saying, all these Democrat states, quack, quack, quack. So, but what if this was actually like, 6 months ago, back in April, when the White House decided after April 7th, when they discovered that the virus was hitting black and brown people more, with more lethality, it was more lethal. It was killing more black and brown people as a percentage of the population or the percentage of people with infections than it was white people. And they decided at that point, and I've talked about this at length and written about it, and it's not even in dispute. They decided at that point, in fact, Jared Kushner said, this is going to hurt the blue state governors more than us. It's only blue states where we've got big outbreaks. At that point in time, it was New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. Let's just let it ride. But what if they also said, if the Democrats are frightened by this and we can convince Republicans not to be frightened by this, then the Democrats will be doing mail-in votes and the Republicans will be voting in person. And if we can stop the counting of the mail-in votes or even slow down the mail so those mail-in votes don't get there and don't get counted, we can win an election. I mean, was this an intentional strategy that was put into place back in April or May or June? And where they brought in Louis DeJoy and they just laid this out as a strategy, and they got their lawyers together and they said, this is what we're going to do. We need to start challenging these mail-in votes. Was this an intentional strategy that they've been doing for 6 or 8 months? Or was this something that they just cobbled together in the last month or two? If it's the last month or two, then, it's kind of happened out in the open. But if this was part of their plan starting back in March, or April, or May, or June, that is a level of, this goes beyond devious and perfidy. I'm willing to let 250,000 people die in order to scare people away from voting in person so that you can win an election. In other words, if this is the case, if the strategy that they are playing out right now, if the strategy that they have been playing out right in front of all of us loudly for the last month, and Trump has been talking about this out loud, if that strategy was put into place more than a month ago, it means that part of that strategy was to let Americans die. Are you following this? Do you get this? I mean, part of the strategy was to let Americans die because that would frighten people into not voting in person. And then, the other half of it was, of course, to go on Fox News and go on right-wing hate radio and promote the idea that, it's just the flu, don't worry. I mean, there was a polling place down in Texas yesterday where 3 of the poll workers refused to wear masks, which was causing people to show up with masks, and they were going, wait a minute, no mask, I'm leaving, I'm out of here. And the guy at the door who was handing out disposable pens for the voting machine, the guy at the door that you had to walk within a foot of to get into the polling place was not wearing a mask. And when he was asked about this by a reporter, he said, why do I have to wear a mask? I'm not over 80 and I'm not in a nursing home. Which is the meme that they've been pushing on Fox News and right-wing hate radio, that, the only people who really die from this are over 80 in nursing homes. Well, disproportionately, those folks do die, yes, but we had a 13-year-old die a couple days ago. People in their 30s and 40s are dying in substantial numbers. People in their 50s and 60s, huge numbers. relative to the flu. I mean, we've got 250,000 people dead, or nearly. Will be in a week or so. If killing Americans or letting Americans die was part of Donald Trump's electoral strategy, then there should be hell to pay. Now, the Official Records Act would require the White House to keep records of any of those meetings, but I'm guessing that they're not going to, they ignore the Hatch Act, they're going to ignore the Official Records Act. And they're probably running the paper shredders overtime right now. And certainly once Biden is declared the victor, the shredders will start running in the White House 24/7 for the next 2 months, which is just mind-boggling. Anyhow, we're processing the election, all of us here collectively. I'll be picking up your phone calls after this break we're going to hit in just a few seconds. And here on the Thom Hartmann Program, working out what we know and what we don't know, and how we think things are going to play out and why. I think the why is one of the big questions. I keep saying it's the media, and Democrats keep going, oh, what are you talking about? It's so frustrating. We will be right back. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Michael in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom. I was thinking, trying to see what your opinion is on this. Instead of fighting them on the media front, spending all that money and effort, how about we focus more on education so it would be harder to brainwash someone who can actually critically think?
That would be a good start. But, about $2 billion was spent in this election by Democrats. And maybe more. I mean, we don't have the numbers yet. But let's say it's just $1 billion. With $1 billion, you could buy the largest radio network in America. In fact, Clear Channel was up for sale for $1 billion, $1.1 billion, just a year or three ago. And, so it's like instead of putting all this money into advertising. But I completely agree with you, Michael. I mean, we're still suffering from Ronald Reagan putting Bill Bennett in charge of the education department and then gutting our civics education curriculum all around the United States. It's an ongoing crisis. So spot on, Michael. Well said. Richard in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I have a question about the election. People who vote on the machine, they vote through the die vote machine, and these machines have produce no records. How do the Democrats ensure that the record is correct, the voting is correct, no cheating?
All right, we need to go to, this was a topic that Bernie and I used to talk about. Back in 2004, we were talking about this on the air, that we need paper ballots. We need to have an audit trail, and we need to have a requirement for periodic random audits. And we need to get rid of voting machines that are privately owned by for-profit corporations that have a political and economic agenda, and replace them with machines that are owned by governments, that are open source programmed. And by the way, there's a company now that is offering machines like this to governments with open source software, and everything is transparent, and they produce a clear paper trail that the voter can check out as well as can be used in an audit. So yeah, spot on. This is what we need to be doing. Thanks a lot for the call, Richard. Lewis in Los Angeles. Hey, Lewis, what's up? Lewis? Okay, we got you, Lewis. Let's try John in Woodbridge, Virginia. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Mr. Harvey. Thank you so much for taking my call, sir, and thank you for all of you done. We are celebrating here in, the Commonwealth State. We maintain blue. I know I was a little worried for a while there with some of the right-wing media saying that the output from the urban areas was not what they expected to be, of course, putting that fear-mongering out there that black and brown people don't vote. But we came to find out that, it was the energy of young people who came out and supported, and we were able to keep the state blue where it's supposed to be. But, Mr. Hartmann, one question I did, and a little concern, especially a lot of young voters had on their minds, that there was an overwhelming majority of support for redistricting. And there's a lot of concern that there might be a chance for gerrymandering, especially next year as the state heads into the gubernatorial and lieutenant governor races. So what would you recommend what we do? I mean, do we like you talked earlier about a media strategy over a drawing strategy or a geographical strategy? So what do you recommend that we do to make sure that you keep the state blue, not only just next year, but going forward in Virginia?
Yeah, I think it should be not so much about keeping the state blue as about being honest about who wants what in your state. And that means doing what California has done, which is where you have a nonpartisan electoral commission of professionals, academics who are drawing the districts in an effort to, make things contiguous and produce proportionate or balanced representation. John, thank you for the call. Great question. We'll be right back. On the Science Revolution this week, how a Green New Deal could save hundreds of thousands of lives. Also, Dr. Justin Frank submitted an amicus brief to the Supreme Court on Bush v. Gore and is talking about psychoanalytic and family dynamic perspective in that context. I weigh in on how the GOP is an organized gang of sociopaths. Meet the 14-year-old climate activist, Haven Coleman. She'll be discussing how youth climate activists are leading the push for climate action in the Democratic Party and why they believe voting for climate in 2020 is so critical. And in Geeky Science, why healthcare for all is a climate solution. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just checked the updated numbers on the race right now. The New York Times is calling Biden 227 electoral votes, Trump 213. Biden is ahead by several million votes, which means that if we were actually electing our president through the process called democracy, Biden would clearly be the winner. But then so would Hillary Clinton, and so would Al Gore. So why is it that we call ourselves a Democratic Republic? Pat in Sherman, Texas. Hey, Pat, what's on your mind today?
I was wanting to know why John Connally was predicted a winner when the ballots are not even counted.
Generally speaking, when they do that, they do it based on past votes in the state. I mean, this is Texas, so this will be a statewide election, but they're looking at how people have performed in the past, and they get the larger counties that can be an indicator of or can be kind of the tail that wags the dog. They will look at the vote there and extrapolate from that. And I think it's very, very rare that they're wrong, Pat. So I'm guessing that John Cornyn has beaten, was it MJ Eager?
I think so.
As I recall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
MJ in any case. Yeah, which is unfortunate. And some of the numbers are just wild. I mean, in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham beating Jamie Harrison by double digits, by 12 points, as I recall. That's pretty amazing too. So, but that's how they do it, Pat. Thanks a lot for the call, David in Phoenix. Hey, David, what's up?
Oh yeah, Tom. You can't imagine how important it is to me to listen to you in this time of stress, because I can count on you to expose the truth. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what's going on here in Arizona and ask you a little bit about Redshift, because we're really excited. And it looks like we're winning in all areas, up and down the ballot. For example, in Maricopa County, we're for the first time ever, we're going to win all the offices, all the way from treasurer to county attorney and so on and so forth. And Proposition 208 for education, we're going to pick up, around $750 million to $1 billion for education, and it's going to be paid for by the super rich. Anybody earns over $450,000 per year, there's going to be a tax that's going to cover that. And then Prop 207, we're going to legalize marijuana, and of course Mark Kelly is going to win. And in our House, as you know, we have had 5 out of 9. Congressional seats, and we might up it to 6 because Tipper Nini might beat Schweigert. In that Scottsdale area, there's usually a 12-point advantage for Republicans, and right now they're kind of tied. She's a little bit ahead, so she just might take that seat. A lot going on here. We're really excited. And in Arizona, as predicted, all these things were going to happen. And it's funny that in the other states it's not really happening. It's almost like, is there some kind of a red shift going on or something? Because in Arizona, we know our votes are going to be counted because Katie Hobbs is a Democrat. She's doing a hell of a good job, and all the votes are going to be counted. And then Adrian Fontes, 64% of all the votes come out of Maricopa County, and he's a Democrat. We have a really efficient system. We got our votes counted right away. We're right on the ball over here, and all of us Democrats just worked our butt off over here to make this happen.
Yeah, that's great, David. Congratulations on the victory. And in terms of redshift refers to the difference between the polls, or the exit polls specifically, and the actual tabulated election results. It's a phenomena that really started popping up around 2000 and has taken on epic proportions in a number of states where, frankly, I think that the voting apparatus in a bunch of ways, number one, with regard to purging voters from the rolls, and number two, with the security of the voting machines, is kind of sketchy. So that's something that, we all need to keep our eyes on. Thanks a lot for the call, David. Jared in Downington, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, what's up?
Okay, Tom. A couple things. One, Pennsylvania results are still not in. They have not started counting the mail-in ballots. So specifically, my vote and my family's vote not counted until literally today, and we are not going to know the full results until Friday. Because if you look at the results, the breakdown is Chester County, then you got Delaware County, and you got Montgomery County and Philadelphia County, along with Allegheny County. All these counties do not even have above 70. Some of them are like 70% in, 80%. Philadelphia is 61%. So we are not going to know the results for a while until these. Yeah,
it's over 1 million mail-in ballots that have not yet been counted in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and they're swinging hard Biden. So, I think
over 70%.
I think we need to stop, jumping the gun here with calling that, okay, this state's going to lose, this state's going to win, and we just need to just wait until the results finally come in. And also, Donald Trump, mask is off, full-on fascist, like not even like hyperbolic anymore. He literally said, I won, and we should stop counting votes. We need to march on the White House if he tries to stage a coup. And the military must be involved.
I guarantee you, if he tries to steal this election right in front of us, right in front of everybody, and even Fox News, Louise and I tuned into Fox News this morning, they're like, we don't know who's going to be the president. This is what it's looking like. And I'm like, this is bad news for Trump. He is going down. Jared, thank you for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back in about 5 minutes with more of your calls as we're all kind of working through this process here, and I'm keeping you up to date on the news as it's breaking. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Coke public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. He does not want this cash, the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Koch's products without ever seeing Koch's name attached. Koch refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Koch is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Koch makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book Kochland by Christopher Leonard. David K. Johnston.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, we have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for folks who support our program. It's about a growing movement, oddly enough, on the hard right, on the far fringe extreme right, that says that because Congress, after the Civil War, had not seated senators and members of the House from the former Confederate states and refused to until they changed their state constitutions to eliminate slavery, because they did not have a say in the writing and the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that ended slavery, gave equal protection under the law to everybody, and guaranteed the right to vote to formerly enslaved people, that because the Confederate States were not represented, these are illegitimate amendments. And oddly, one of the people who's at the forefront of this is Amy Coney Barrett. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. We are processing, questioning, understanding, figuring out what's going on here in the United States with all this. Michelle in Denver. Hey, Michelle, what's on your mind today?
We're the example of how to get it right in Colorado. That can go from legalizing weed to voting. We had the highest vote count totals ever, 80% here. We're mostly Democratic. It's majority white, but the white people are for black and brown people here. So there's ways to do this, but unfortunately, it's not the Democrats' fault. Number one, you have a candidate in Trump that's never been seen before, never been done before. He campaigned since day one of his election, so he was able to do things that normal candidates wouldn't be doing during their election. He didn't work. He golfed and he campaigned. That's all he did for 4 years. So to blame the Democrats saying they didn't have enough messaging and all that is improper, because there was no way to know this was coming. We got election with our candidate, who was Joe Biden. It wouldn't have mattered who it was. Like you said, you have Fox, right-wing news outlet, who spreads misinformation along with billionaires. So unfortunately, we have to find a way to shut that down. Fox News shouldn't be allowed to air this. Yeah, or compete with it every time we try to do that.
I'm not a fan of calls for censorship, Michelle. I don't think that we can do that. But I do think that, and I've been yelling about this since 2005, that there was this feeble effort to fund Air America Radio. When they went bankrupt, it was a $14 or $17 million bankruptcy. That is chump change, right? That is 5 minutes worth of fundraising in this election. We spent $1 billion. Democrats spent over $1 billion on this election, and we couldn't come up with $17 million to keep Air America Radio on the air. It's just it's mind-boggling. And I've had this conversation with elected politicians, Democrats. Some of them get it, particularly the ones who come on this program and take calls from people, and they're like, "Whoa, there's a lot of people listening all over the country." Yes, there are. But you talk to some of the others, and they're like, "Oh, what's the big deal? We don't need to be funding this. We don't, just let the free market take care of it." And it's like, no, it's not the free market. You've got media, you've got giant radio networks that are owned by billionaires and right-wingers. Salem now is part of this, Council for Policy Strategies or whatever it is. And there's nothing like that on the left. Forgive my interruptions. Michelle, finish your thought.
It's not, but we should be able to shut down disinformation and hate. We're getting killed. So there are black and brown people that are getting killed either through COVID, along with whites, through COVID, through a number of other sources, the shootings, things like that. The disinformation shouldn't be allowed as journalism. Number one, it should be flagged like Twitter and Facebook are doing. They're flagging misinformation. When you have a bunch of angry white people who are upset about a black man getting elected, this is the cause. They've been suppressed for generations. So now you have a candidate who was brought up by Michael Steele, Steve Schmidt. All of this fear and hate was back in Nixon, back in those days. So what do you think that does when you keep building that fear and hate up? Eventually it's going to explode, and you're going to get a candidate who feeds off that. And that's all Trump's feeding off, is their fear and anger. It isn't about the economy. It isn't about any of this. It's about the country getting browner. And people got to wake up to this, and we got to be able to say you're racist. What you are doing does not support American values, and it disenfranchises millions of people. Once we can get honest with ourselves, maybe things can change too. And the Democrats did try to do that. But unfortunately, you had a candidate campaigning for 4 years straight. He campaigned for 4 years straight. Yeah, he was able to reach Venezuelans and immigrants and all this with disinformation. That's all he was doing for 4 years straight. And we got to wake up to that fact. Now, I believe some of the vote is wrong. I believe they cheated. And we've got to overhaul that system. It should be the popular vote, and we got to get rid of the electoral college, because I believe cheating went on. I believe they hid balance. I believe did enough to skew the election results because they had help. And like you said, they're using the shredder as we speak right now because they know they're going to lose. So we have to punish every single one of them Republicans, and we have to punish Trump. If it's prison, it has to be.
The point that I would make to this conversation, Michelle, is that 15 years ago, if somebody had come out and said, "Oh, the Earth is flat," there would have been, well, even today, if somebody says the Earth is flat, people are like, "Yeah, right. You know, this is a crazy person." But the media has been so enthusiastic in their both sidesism. You know, oh, if Democrats are saying climate change is real and Republicans are saying it's not, we have to consider both sides of this discussion. No, there are no two sides to that discussion. The Republicans are spreading lies that are promoted by fossil fuel billionaires like Charles Koch and the organizations that he funds. You know, it's just straightforward stuff, and we need to stop buying that. Michelle, thank you. Excellent points, all. Thank you. Max in Clackamas. Hey, Max, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I'm pretty stoked. First of all, I know we have, well, I mean, you just mentioned that you do have pretty national audience. Senator Katie Muth is a Pennsylvania state senator, and if you go to her Twitter feed at Senator Muth, M-U-S, or M-U-T-H, excuse me, you actually get a link to the Pennsylvania mail-in counting dashboard is what it is. And what it's showing, Tom, is that once these ballots in Pennsylvania are released, basically, literally, Biden is ahead 1 million votes in that mass of votes that's going to be released. But that's super exciting. Not what I called about. What I called about is the fact that so here in Oregon, we literally are the first in the nation, I believe, to pass a ballot measure led by the people to decriminalize possession of all drugs. And what it does is it results in either $100 maximum $100 fine, or as a punishment, so to speak, it actually mandates that you complete a drug rehabilitation health assessment.
Drug treatment course. Yeah, and Max, if I could, I think that we need to be very careful about the framing of this, because it's not just decriminalizing drugs. What it is shifting the consumption of drugs out of the criminal justice system and into the mental health system. And there's substantial funding here in Oregon as a result of this ballot initiative that passed, so that people who are using heroin or cocaine or LSD or whatever it may be, in a way that you would call substance abuse, that are hooked on this stuff, can get treatment rather than get prison. And that's a huge big deal. The way it's being portrayed in the national news is, oh, they just decriminalized drugs. Like, hey, I think I'll go down the street and buy some heroin. No, that's not it at all. yes, the criminal penalties have been eliminated by and large. It's civil penalties now. There are still penalties, but the bottom line is that the use of these drugs now is no longer a crime. It is a medical crisis, and and that's a wonderful thing. I think that's a really good thing. I think it's going to lead to a lot fewer people dying of overdoses and a lot fewer people having their lives and their families ripped apart by addiction. And the war on drugs strategy that Richard Nixon rolled out in the late 60s has completely and utterly failed to do anything except put a lot of people in jail who shouldn't be there. And totally. It's really time that we started offering medical care instead. So we need to be really careful. I think all of us, whenever we discuss what happened in Oregon yesterday, that we saw, quote, decriminalize these hard drugs, that we shifted them out of the criminal justice system, or we shifted drug users and abusers out of the criminal justice system into the mental health system. And that's a good thing. That's a desirable thing. Make sense?
Not only that, but we also shifted the proceeds from the sale of drugs by taxing marijuana, which was also legalized in New Jersey, Montana, South Dakota, of all places, and as previous caller mentioned, Arizona. So we're seeing, hopefully that leads to the end of the 13th Amendment legalized slavery, that is incarceration. I really hope Biden-Harris administration issues executive orders and fixes the problem.
Yeah, I'm with you. And take all of these drugs off Schedule 1. I'm with you. Max, thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're working our way through the election results here as they're still coming in, but it's looking better and better for Joe Biden every minute. And welcome back. Let's see here. Ed in Roselle, Illinois. Hey, Ed, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Yeah, hey, Tom. I just wanted to really emphasize the opening rant you made on today's show about the Democratic Party and the media. I know you've made it before, but, after listening to that, I called my Dick Durbin's office, and he had heard of you, which was a good thing. And I suggested that him and his communications director listen to that rant, as every Democratic communication director should. But then I asked him, I said, do you guys even have a podcast? And he said, not that he's aware of. And I just like I said, want to emphasize, it's like the Democratic Party is just written off drive time. And that combination of that, and what happens a lot, and I hear this a lot, is you come across with a brilliant point like that, it's succinct, you can get it across simply, you'll have a point like that, or somebody like Randy will have a great point, and instead of having a Democratic Party to go across all the entire width of all the congressmen and senators and saying, hey, this is a great point, we got to get it out there, because they don't have that kind of setup, it just kind of disappears more or less. Whereas with the Republicans, when they come up with a great point, they hang on to it like a dog with a bone for weeks.
Yeah, there's another point here, Ed, and this was pointed out to me by a Democratic politician a few years back, and I think that there's probably a lot of truth to it, and I didn't include it in my rant, and I'm not pounding on it today or over the next couple of days because we're in the election time and it's something that reflects poorly on Democrats, and I'm just kind of holding it back, but I will lay it out very quickly here. And that is that when right-wing radio really hit its peak in the mid to late 90s in the United States, when it became a thing that had audiences of 15, 20, 30 million people a week all across the country, what happened was the right-wing radio hosts were driving the political train, and Republican politicians had to basically follow the policies and do the things that the right-wing radio hosts were talking about, or they wouldn't get reelected. And that's why the entire Republican Party has gone hard right Tea Party. And the corporate Democrats, the New Dem Coalition and the Blue Dog Coalition, and the Democrats who are proud of the fact that they're taking lots of money from big corporations, they are scared to death of a national progressive radio infrastructure. that will hold them to account as much as it'll hold Republicans to account. And
yeah, but how's that
that's
been
a
working
problem
for?
within the Democratic Party. Actually, for some of them, it's been working out just fine. I don't think it's going to continue to for a very long time, but for some of them, it's been working out fine. But, some of the resistance inside the Democratic Party to having a party-wide promotion of media has been coming out of that. They don't want media telling them what to do.
Well,
they don't want me going on the air saying, hey, Congressman so-and-so just took $1 million from AT&T, don't vote for him. That's what they're afraid of.
I understand. Well, what got me was when Ro Khanna didn't even know the true Santa Claus theory. I would think every Democratic party member should know that.
Well, they should.
They know about Obamacare, and that's a problem.
Right, and Ro does now. It's a good thing. I mean, Ro Khanna's a good guy. He won his election by 77%. And I got to run. I'm sorry, but thank you. We'll be right back. The hidden history of the war on voting tells how the GOP has been stealing elections for decades and will again this year unless we stop them. So we have a new video over at ThomHartmann.com for people who are supporters of our program. And it gets into the 2016 election and what lessons we can draw from that for the 2020 election. For example, in 2016, according to the exit polls, and all we have to look at right now are pre-polls, but the exit polls, these are the actual voters who are being asked. In 2016, in Florida, Hillary Clinton, according to the exit polls, beat Donald Trump 47.7 to 46.4. According to the exit polls in 2016 in North Carolina, Hillary Clinton beat Trump 48.6 to 46.5%. In Pennsylvania, according to the exit polls, Hillary Clinton beat Trump 50.5% to Trump's 46.1%. And in Wisconsin, she beat Trump 48.2% to 44.3%. And yet all four of those states gave their electoral votes, the official win, to Donald Trump. Why is that? I lay it all out. You can check it out over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. We're talking about the election, which is still up in the air, but I think we can see which way the wind blows. Len in Woodmere, New York. Hey, Len, what's on your mind today?
Hi. The woman who was just saying that Trump had 4 years to promote himself, he lied, we all know, by saying it was the greatest economy in the history of America. But we knew what he was saying, and we never generated a counter to that, which I actually did. I mentioned to you one time, with maybe the not right inflection, but something that people would know hear over and over again. So the big difference between Democrats is they try to rationally discuss things as opposed to repeat mantras, and which you get drummed into people's heads. I mean, the simple narrative to counter that was, and we could have said it just like this, that, in a way that even Donald Trump would understand that Barack Obama, took a swing at the economy in 2009 and it went sailing for 8 years. And then he stepped away. Trump stepped up to the tee, pointed to the economy and said, look what I did. In golfing terms.
Yeah, well, not only that. I mean, Obama was actually pointing this out, Len. When he hit the campaign trail, Obama was making the point that he had created, now this is assuming that a president can take credit for job creation, but Obama was saying that he had created more jobs in his last 3 years than Donald Trump did in his first 3 years before COVID came along. The economy grew at a faster rate during Obama's last 3 years than it did during Trump's first 3 years, for example.
The difference is in the repetition and the mantra. It should have been something that, in some way or another, Biden would have been able to say at the debates, and it would have been something that everyone was familiar with hearing because he had been repeating it. So that nothing ever really, baked into a narrative, apart from the other narrative that if you want to fix the economy, you got to fix the virus. I mean, all this stuff was never baked into a conversation that triggered immediately.
This is because on the left, we don't have top-down messaging. On the right, there is top-down messaging. But on the left, the messaging is scattered all over the place. I'm with you, Len. Thank you very much. Mayor in Allentown, Pennsylvania, I think you want to speak to the same issue, don't you, Mayor?
Oh, absolutely. He's right where I live. Yeah, in addition to media infrastructure and think tanks, the one thing we really need is a Democratic Frank Luntz. Somebody who can take complex issues and turn them into pithy sayings, like turning the inheritance tax into the death tax. Well, what about regulations? Why have we dropped the word safety or fairness regulations? And your caller in Miami brings up socialism. Well, what is the opposite of socialism?
Fascism.
Anti-socialism. You want to be an anti-socialist?
Well, that works too.
You see where I'm going with this? You have to get the
No, I'm with you, Mayor. I admit, I wrote a book about this in 2008 called "Cracking the Code" about how to do political communication, and it's just I wrote it for Democrats in the 2008 election, and some paid attention to it, some even used it, but nobody. And this is not I'm not singing a sad song here. My point is that a lot of us have been saying this for a long, long time, and the Democratic Party. I get it. The Democratic Party is a large coalition. One of the problems that we have, Mayor, and yeah, let me give you all the time you want right after this, but let me just make this one point. The Democratic Party got broken in half in 1992 when Bill Clinton abandoned the positions of the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson, the previous Democratic president, and adopted the positions, some of the positions of the Reagan-Bush folks, particularly with regard to money from corporations and corporate funding and the whole neoliberal thing, free trade, all this other stuff. When Clinton embraced that, the Democratic Party got split in half, and it's still split. And that split is causing basically a crisis in messaging, because you can't get the corporate Democrats and the progressive Democrats to agree on a unified message. Doesn't happen. And whereas in the Republican Party, they have effectively purged their party of everybody except for the hard right neo-fascists, basically. Back to you.
Well, the pendulum, the more energy you pull it back to one direction, it's going to fly with equal force to the other direction. So maybe it's time for the progressives to start purging the corporate Democrats at a much faster rate than we've been doing, and do what the Tea Party did. I mean, we need that. We need some of that discipline, that top-down discipline, and we need somebody out there. Hey, I'm available. I have a degree in communications. I'll do it.
First, we have to have a progressive majority within the Democratic Party, and we're not quite there yet. But what you're describing is exactly what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did. She took on the third most powerful Democrat in the U.S. House of Representatives and beat him by pointing out that he was a corporate shill. And this is the direction I think the Democratic Party needs to go. But again, when I say that out loud, it scares a lot of Democrats who are saying, well, maybe we shouldn't be supporting progressive media, or at least the corporate Democrats. Mayor, thank you for your point is so well made. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Tom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code Tom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Tom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Tom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Tom.
Hey, it's Thom Hartmann. We're reading from A Dark Money, the hidden history of the billionaires behind the rise of the radical right in today's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. This is from chapter 11, page 271. The official opening of the 112th Congress took place on January 5th, 2011, when Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, handed off an oversized ceremonial gavel to her successor, John Boehner. But a new era of ultra-conservative billionaire influence had already begun. Before the public swearing-in ceremony got underway, David Koch, whose donor network had spent at least $130.7 million on winning a Republican majority, was in the new Speaker-to-be's office, ornate office, chatting amiably with his staff. The People's House was under new management, and critics would suggest new ownership. While Koch was a very public presence on the Capitol, his political adjutant, Tim Phillips, the president of Americans for Prosperity, was deep in the inner sanctum of the congressional committee that mattered most to the bottom line of Koch Industries. Phillips's most important destination that day was the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which under the new Republican majority had now increased its power to block President Obama's environmental agenda in Congress. The committee could bury progress on climate change and harass the EPA for the foreseeable future. And then just jumping through a little anecdote about Lee Fong and David Koch, they continue. In Plutocrats, the rise of the new global super-rich and the fall of everyone else, journalist Krista Freeland describes how those with massive financial resources almost universally use them to secure politics and policies beneficial to their interests, often at the expense of the less well-off. In the United States, a number of studies have shown that in recent years, this tendency has distorted politics in very specific ways. In a study he conducted for the nonpartisan Sunlight Foundation, the political scientist Lee Drutman found that increasingly concentrated wealth in America resulted in more polarization and extremism, especially on the right. Very rich benefactors in the Republican Party were far more opposed to taxes and regulations than the rest of the country. He discovered the more Republicans depend upon 1% of the 1% donors, the more conservative they tend to be. The 112th Congress soon unfolded as a case study of what David Frum, an advisor to the former President George W. Bush, described as the growing and, in his view, destructive influence of the Republican Party's radical rich. The radicalization of the party's donor base, he observed, has propelled the party to advocate policies that were more extreme than anything since Barry Goldwater and his 1964 presidential campaign. It also led Republicans in Congress to try tactics they would never have dared use before, end quote. Hard data supported this. Harvard's Theta Skop poll found that the House took the biggest leap to the far right since political scientists began recording quantitative measurements of legislators' positions. There was no better example than the Koch's newly won influence over the House Energy and Commerce Committee. In the previous Congress, the panel had been chaired by Henry Waxman, the liberal Democrat from California, who had quarterbacked the House's successful passage of the cap-and-trade bill, only to see it die in the Senate. Now the new Republican leadership stocked the committee with oil industry advocates, many of whom owed huge campaign debts to the Kochs. Koch Industries PAC was the single largest oil and gas industry donor to members of the panel, outspending even ExxonMobil. It had donated to 22 of the committee's 31 Republican members and 5 of its Democratic members, too. In addition, 5 out of the 6 Republican freshmen on the committee had received outside support from Americans for Prosperity. Meanwhile, many of the new committee members had signed an unusual pledge swearing fealty to the Koch's agenda. They promised to vote against any kind of carbon tax unless it was offset by comparable spending cuts, an unlikely scenario. The No Climate Tax pledge was invented by Americans for Prosperity in 2008, when the Supreme Court cleared the way for the EPA to regulate greenhouse gases as it does other pollutants. The Koch's pledge was modeled on the enormously successful one that the anti-tax crusader Grover Norquist had used to intimidate Republican lawmakers from raising taxes. But in this instance, it served not a cause so much as a company. By the start of the legislative session in 2011, fully 156 members of Congress had signed the Koch brothers' No Climate Tax pledge. Many returning members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee had already taken the pledge, and of the 12 new Republicans on the panel, 9 were signatories, including 5 of the 6 freshmen. A prime example of the symbiotic relationship between the Kochs and the committee was Morgan Griffith, who had defeated Rick Boucher in the district that represented Saltville, Virginia, and was among the new wave of appointees to the Energy and Commerce Committee who were openly indebted to the Koch brothers for their seats. Americans for Prosperity operatives were guests of honor at a victory rally soon after the election, at which Griffith gushed, quote, I'm just thankful that you all helped me out in so many ways, end quote. The Koch's investment soon paid off. Once in office, Griffith became an outspoken skeptic of mainstream climate science, drawing national ridicule for lecturing scientific experts as they testified before Congress that they needed to consider the possibility that Mesopotamia and the Vikings owed their success to global warming, and the melting ice caps on Mars showed that humans were not its cause on Earth. Congressman Griffith became a lead player in the House Republicans' war on the EPA, demanding that the agency be reined in. Within a month after he took office, he and other House Republicans gutted the EPA budget by a punishing 27%. Dark Money, the hidden history of the billionaires behind the rise of the radical right, by Jane Mayer.
Trump whines about mail-in voting, the more you know it's going for Biden. I mean, Trump's time is numbered. We may not grab the Senate. We'll probably know in 3 or 4 days, maybe tomorrow, maybe today. I don't know. We'll see. But, we don't know yet. But I think it's fairly safe to say at this point, Trump is toast. That said, I've been talking about right-wing media and how Democrats need to build out their media infrastructure as well. And there is a small vestige of this kind of left over from the days of Air America. On the commercial side, there's, a half a dozen or so stations around the country, some of them quite substantial, and who are doing just a spectacular job of, staying in there like the Energizer Bunny and selling advertising. And if you happen to be listening to us on one of those stations, call up their advertisers and tell them, hey, thank you for supporting this station. We're on Pacifica stations all across the country. If you happen to be listening to us on one of them, they're funded by their listeners. Many of them are actually in fund drive right now, fall fund drive. Call them up and make a contribution. We're on Free Speech TV. Let them know, help. Well, they're funded by contributions too. You can help them out. We're on Sirius XM. If you hear an advertiser, call that advertiser and thank them for sponsoring the progressive channel, or the Progress channel on Sirius XM. My point is that we can support the progressive media that we have on this side, but that it's a small slice of the overall media landscape. For every progressive station in America, there's 100 conservative stations. And that's not an accident. And let me give you an example of how this is going to go. In Arizona, and this is absolutely fascinating, Arizona has gone blue. Right? Martha McSally has lost to Kelly. Trump has lost to Biden. Arizona, we had a caller earlier from the Phoenix area who was talking about how, right up and down the board, basically every elected position has gone to a Democrat. And so the Trump kids, Eric and Don Jr., Uday and Kusei, as most people call them, have come up with a conspiracy theory because a couple of right-wingers on Twitter, on Facebook, or on some media that these Trump kids were able to see have said, I filled out my ballot with a Sharpie, and therefore I'm pretty sure it didn't get counted. And they're calling it Sharpiegate. Now, the election folks in Arizona have pushed back and said, no. This is what, let's see, which Trump tweeted this? Oh, it was Matt Schlapp who's tweeting this. This is the guy who's behind, CPAC and all that kind of stuff. He says, apparently the use of Sharpie pens in GOP precincts is causing ballots to be invalidated. Could be huge numbers of mostly Trump supporters. More to come. And then, Don and Eric start retweeting this and pushing it around. And now the Pima County election officials said this claim is false. They tweeted this out. Well, actually, they said it in a statement. The felt tip ballot controversy burning through social media is false. Don't get caught up in it. Arizona ballot tabulating machines can read ballots marked with a felt tip pen. So kind of end of story, right? No, it's not the end of the story, because I guarantee you that if probably right now, but certainly 2 or 3 hours from now, you tune into your local right-wing hate radio station in Cheyenne, Wyoming, or West Wazoo, Texas, or some little town in New Mexico or Arizona, or pick your place, right? If you tune, or even in the big metro areas, because there's right-wing hate radio all over in the big cities. If you tune into your local right-wing hate radio station, what you are going to hear this afternoon is probably Sharpiegate. And it's going to get out there, and it's going to start echoing through the media. It's gone from the guy who runs CPAC to to Uday and Qusay Trump, and now it's going to go out into the right-wing radio sphere. I guarantee it. Because they've got this giant media infrastructure. It may even make its way onto Fox News. And once it makes its way onto Fox News, it could show up in the New York Times or the Washington Post. Now, Pima County got ahead of this and debunked it right away. Had they not, though, I guarantee you that scenario that I just described of going from a professional right-wing operative who gets, probably a fair amount of his money from groups that are funded by, right-wing billionaires, from Matt Schlapp to Uday and Qusay Trump, to Don and Eric, to, into the right wingosphere. Where is the left wingosphere? I mean, yeah, we're here, but Talkers Magazine says that this show has a national weekly audience of around 7 million people. That's nothing compared to what right-wing radio is doing all across the country, in every city, in every rural area, everywhere. I mean, we're doing okay, but compare. And we need to be building media. We need to be paying attention to media. Anyhow, speaking of media, Sandy in Columbus, Ohio, listening to WGRN, one of our great progressive stations in Ohio. Hey, Sandy, you're on the air. What's up?
Hi. Thanks for taking the call. Yeah, I was actually calling about this very topic. And last night, I usually watch the mainstream media for the election results. Last night, I turned on for some progressive stations. I don't know if I can say what they are. They weren't stations, but media, like Democracy Now! and Real News Network. Oh, my gosh, the coverage was so great. And I was texting my friends, and they were getting really kind of nervous and down, and I wasn't thrilled, but just listening to the sharp analysis from people who have so much experience in the field on the front lines and their deep analysis and their wisdom, it was amazing. So I think I went to bed a little bit more, I think I listened longer and went to bed a little bit more with a little feeling of promise than they did. So I agree with if everybody was listening to progressive, or so many more people were listening to progressive radio, we'd see a sea change in this country, because it is honest. And
it is not that hard to, if you've got enough information, if you can deliver to people information that is credible and they believe, and it helps if it's truthful, but if it's credible and they can believe it, you can change people's minds. And it happens. It's happened to me. I was listening to what you might call conservative radio back when I was in my 20s, on the WJR, the big station in Detroit. And, for about a year, I think I was 27 that year, I decided I was a libertarian, and I got a bumper sticker and everything. And it was because I'd been listening to right-wing talk radio. And, it didn't take me long to kind of wake up from that trance, but, a lot of people never wake up from it.
Yeah, my first vote was for Reagan. Anyway, the other thing I was going to ask you, because you already did it, was going to say, toot your own horn. And, one time I heard that you guys were 8th in the nation of all the stations or something. I'm not quite sure what it was.
Yeah, but we're the 8th largest talk radio show in America, according to Talkers Magazine.
I wish you should say that more often, because that gave me something to tell my friends and family about, and they would listen to that more than me, their crazy relative and friends.
That's interesting.
This is progressive stuff.
Yeah, this show is the #1 progressive radio show in America and has been for well over a decade. the reason I don't pitch that, one of my colleagues, Ed Schultz, used to constantly talk about, his ratings and all this stuff, and it always kind of put me off. I was like, instead of bragging about yourself, let's talk about the issues, and that's been kind of my thinking. I don't know, maybe we should be promoting it more. But Sandy, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Thanks for your kind words and spot on everything you said, and thank you for listening to WGRN there in Columbus, Ohio. We'll be back. It's 15 minutes past the hour. Pick up more of your calls right after this as we are processing what's going on. And it's going to be interesting to see how Sharpie Gate plays out, right? Keep an eye on that one. Stick around. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the place where smart people get their news. Back with more of the news and your calls. And welcome back. Let's see here. David in Torrance, California, watching Free Speech TV. Hey, David, what's up?
Yes, hi. I think one of the lessons of this election is that we should not fall asleep on Hispanic community. More than half the kids that are born in U.S. are partially Hispanic. And I think we should invest on networks to politically educate Hispanic community. This investment is going to be well worth. We can easily fill Texas if we do that.
Yeah, Hispanics are a larger proportion of the American population now than African Americans, if my recollection is correct. And if they're not a larger, they're on course to become. And you're right. An enormous number of families have Hispanic members. I have a Hispanic granddaughter. Excuse me. Yeah. and we need to be investing in that media. And I'm telling you, conservatives, these billionaires and right-wing foundations, they are putting up. They're supporting right-wing Spanish language media. They are supporting right-wing Spanish language hosts. They're inviting them to the White House. They're wining and dining them. They're giving them money. They're giving them support. And literally nothing like that exists on the left in the United States, which is just a disaster. So David's spot on. I am totally with you. Glenn in Falls City, Washington. Hey, Glenn, what's on your mind today? Thanks for listening to KBCS,
Hey,
another great part of our progressive media infrastructure in the United States. What's up?
Oh, absolutely. KBCS is wonderful. So we just had this conversation, my wife and I. She has a good friend who works for a corporate billionaire, and they do great things. They do help with charter schools and advancing minority populations into education and everything. But her big argument, which is pretty amazing because she's a very sharp, very well-educated woman, she thinks that she's the minority voice. The conservative white woman is the minority, and mainstream media is all against them. They don't have a voice, so it's.
Well, that's the grievance thing that Rush Limbaugh started peddling in the late '80s and has become the go-to meme on Fox News and right-wing hate radio all across the country.
Yeah, it's and that's how I felt, and I figured Fox has a loud voice, but the big three, their news might seem like it trends left, but sure, I've heard you say this, if not many others, that truth does kind of skew center left.
Yeah.
And
and so does public opinion, which is the thing that's so baffling. I mean, it was 3 days ago that Fox News released a poll showing that 71% of Americans would prefer a government-run healthcare system to what we have right now. And what did Fox News voters vote for? They voted for the guy who wants to blow up the Affordable Care Act.
Exactly.
It's like, whoa, where do these people come from? Yeah. Glenn, I got to run, but thank you for the call, and thanks for a point well made. Coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, we have a new video up for the supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. I really enjoy doing these separate from what we're doing on the air because sometimes I can say things that would be impolitic or inappropriate to say on the air. Like the name of the website that I'm talking about in this video, and I lay it out and share it with you on the video. It's ratbleepingthecourts.com, and the bleeping, of course, is a word that you just can't say on the air that starts with F. And this website is just outing these judges that Donald Trump and the Federalist Society have been sending through Mitch McConnell's Senate like a friggin' assembly line, and how unqualified they are, how hateful they are, how aggressively they've worked to screw students, to deny. Well, one of them actually said that the women who are on birth control pills, that should be reason to fire people. Right? I mean, it's just insane. You can check it out over at thomhartmann.com. The media, we're talking about the election, we're kind of processing all this stuff. And I think it's important. It's an important process for all of us to be, understanding what's going on. Stephanie in Toledo, Ohio. Hey, Stephanie, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I'm wondering if you think Mitch McConnell is going to retain his position as Senate Majority Leader.
He will if the Republicans control the Senate. Yes.
You don't think
He's already won Kentucky.
You don't think he'll vote in? They will vote in someone else?
No, they won't. He controls so much money. He's not only is he personally worth hundreds of millions of dollars because of Elaine Chao, his wife, but he controls tens of millions of dollars in funds that are given to the Republican Party and to the senatorial campaign committee and whatnot that he redistributes to Republican senators in exchange for their doing what he wants. He has absolute fist around the throat control over the Republican caucus in the United States Senate. Nobody has been willing to go up against Mitch McConnell. And, when Jeff Flake kind of weakly called him and Trump out, Jeff Flake was out of there just like that. So, yeah, Mitch McConnell's going to be around for a while. And, we'll find out over the next few days if he's going to be the Senate Majority Leader or not. But he's certainly going to be around for a while. Stephanie, thank you for the call. Mike in Bryan, Texas. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hello, Tom. First, you brought to mind when I'm 58. When I was a boy scanning AM radio, I was taken in by Ronald Reagan. He was really the first precursor to Limbaugh. And needless to say, Republicans talk the talk until they get elected, and then they do exactly like Donald Trump. And there has been no accounting at all in Washington for the last 4 years. But my point was the voting machines. I voted in a rural area. I went to one machine. It tabulated my votes, gave me a printout, let me check it. And then everybody had to feed the printout into another machine to tabulate the numbers. And what we have seen with these unscrupulous people, which goes all the way to Bob Barr, they are doing everything in their power to steal whatever they can. So how on earth why haven't the Democrats and Independents demanded the utmost scrutiny of who is putting in the code for the simple addition and subtraction machines that are tabulating the votes? Because it's very, very simple to keep a running tally of your numbers and to kick out Democrat votes and to even fabricate Republican votes. Because
and this is what happened to Don Siegelman. He described this on this show a couple of weeks ago, and he's talked about it many times. He wrote a book about it. Don Siegelman was the governor of Alabama. In 2000, he was running for re-election. His opponent, Bob Riley, his campaign was being run by the wife of the federal prosecutor in that district, the husband of the federal prosecutor in that district, and who was best friends with Karl Rove, grew up together. Karl Rove grew up in Alabama. And and in the late night, Tuesday night after the election, when Don Siegelman went to sleep, he had been declared the winner as the governor. And 6,000 votes got moved out of his column and into Bob Riley's column, and it was 6,000, right? It was an even number, which should cause everybody to go, what? And the next morning, they and by a Republican guy on a voting tabulator machine in his particular district. And Siegelman called him out on it the next day. And right-wing hate radio all over Alabama just went nuts, calling Siegelman a poor loser and saying that he should resign immediately and blah, 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 blah. And pretty soon that, the wife of the campaign manager who was the federal prosecutor, Laura Canary was her name, she's prosecuting Don Siegelman. And he ended up in jail. And, on what I consider hugely trumped up charges. And, it's just nuts. So, these tabulators and voting machines can be manipulated. I don't think that that's the larger part of what we're looking at here. It may be what's going on in some of the states that are very, very opaque with regard to their voting processes, like Georgia or Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida. It may be, but I think more of what's going on is that people are being indoctrinated in this right-wing ideology. They are believing what they are being told. And there's no organized effort to push back on this outside of the news networks occasionally saying, oh, Trump just told another lie. And in fact, the news networks, even the so-called progressive networks like MSNBC, constantly are putting Republicans on the air and largely unchallenged. And so, this is where it's going.
Can I run this by you? And then we're old enough to know that coincidences happen from time to time. But I have never. Are you with me? I'm getting music.
Yeah. You got 10 seconds, Mike.
I'm getting. But those 3 counties in the 2016 election that just coincidentally, by the slimmest of margins, tipped the electoral vote into Trump's favor. There is no way, Tom, that you had 3 miracles all at the same time that had the same.
I'm with you, Mike.
Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day. By the way, CNN just called Wisconsin for Biden. This is very, very good news. We'll be right back. For our book club today, we're reading from Thomas Frank's book, Rendezvous with Oblivion, Reports from a Sinking Society. This is chapter 1, titled Servile Disobedience. Social scientists have tried for more than a century to understand how class works. Psychological experiments on the subject, however, are a relatively novel thing. So I was surprised to discover a few years ago that psychologists had published a series of papers on the behavioral aspects of social status, and that their findings were almost uniformly unflattering towards society's winners. In one 2009 study in Psychological Science found that in conversations with strangers, high-status people tend to do more doodling and fidgeting, and also to use fewer engagement cues, looking at the other person, laughing, nodding their heads. A 2010 paper published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that lower-class individuals, in quote, turned out to be better performers on measures of such pro-social virtues as generosity, charity, and helpfulness. A third study found that those of higher status were noticeably worse at assessing the emotions of others or figuring out what facial expressions mean. All of which is to say the rich are different from you and me. They are more rude and less generous. They don't understand, they don't get what others are thinking, and apparently they don't really care. Perhaps this is obvious to you. After all, people don't design toxic debt obligations by calling out what they learned in Sunday school. Still, the research aroused media interest. The Christian Science Monitor's 2010 account of one study ended with this quotation from Michael Krauss, then the University of California, San Francisco, who was one of the researchers, quote, "Being empathic is one of the first steps to helping other people. One of the first things we're really interested in is what can make wealthy people, affluent people, the people with the capacity to give, what can make them empathic?" I think I see the urgency of Dr. Krauss's question. After all, we have spent the past several decades doing everything we could to transfer the wealth of the nation into the bank accounts of the affluent to send them victorious, happy, and glorious long to reign over us. Oh, we've cut their taxes, gladly transferring much of the cost of keeping their property safe onto our own shoulders.
We furnished them with special megaphones so that their voices could be heard over the hubbub of the crowd. We've conferred upon them separate and better schools, their very own transportation system, and a full complement of private security guards. We've built an entire culture of courtiers and sycophants to make their every working hour an otherworldly delight. We let them construct a system of bonuses and executive compensation on the theory that it would be good for everyone if the people at the top got to take home much, much more than the rest of us. And when it turned out that the theory was wrong, that in the most famous cases, executives chased bonuses not to the shareholders' benefit, but at their expense, why, we promptly bailed them out. We allowed them to step into the Fed's discount window and fill their pockets. We generously transferred their reckless investments to our balance sheet, and we chastised them with little more than a polite request that they please not do it again. We've done everything we can to lift them up and exalt them as the new Leviathan. The least they can do in return, one feels, is to show a little empathy. Besides, look what we've done with the old Leviathan, the government. For decades, we've attacked it, redirected it, outsourced it, and filled it with incompetence and cronies. Yes, it still works well enough when we need to blow up some small country, but those branches of it designed to help our Americans of lower socioeconomic status, in quotes, as the scientists would put it, are now bare. We need the rich to be nice. We need them to stop doodling, paying it, and to pay attention and get generous. Now that the government has divested from the empathy business, we need the rich to discover brotherly love and fast. Come to think of it, wasn't that supposed to be the deal in the first place? The arrangement Andrew Carnegie brokered over a century ago when he made his big career move from Steel King to public library baron? The laissez-faire social contract would grant private business a free hand, but in exchange, those who piled up massive wealth were supposed to extend a magnanimous hand to the rest of us. As Carnegie wrote in his famous 1889 essay, The Gospel of Wealth, we don't need socialism to solve our problems. Philanthropy is the true antidote for the temporary inequality distribution of wealth and reconciliation of the rich and poor, quoting Carnegie. Going further, Carnegie argued that the duty of the man of wealth was, quote, to consider all surplus revenues which come to him simply as trust funds, which he's called upon to administer in the manner which, in his judgment, is best calculated to produce the most beneficial results for the community. The man of wealth thus becoming the mere trustee and agent for his poorer brethren, end quote. That same way of thinking led Carnegie to support the estate tax. Of all forms of taxation, this seems the wisest, he wrote. It was wise because it would, quote, induce the rich man to attend to the administration of wealth during his life. And if he didn't, then the tax would return most of his hoardings to the community from which it came, using Carnegie's words. Vestiges of the Carnegie attitude survive to this day. 2009 study of high net worth individuals by Barclays Wealth confirmed that American philanthropists tend to understand their giving in a context in which the state is either absent or irrelevant. And of course, there are plenty of nice plutocrats who don't fidget or doodle when talking to strangers and who have no problem endowing a ward or a wing in return for a commemorative plaque. The business headlines even occasionally tell of billionaires coming together under the leadership of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates to donate their fortunes to worthy causes. But the billionaires with the strongest sense of class solidarity have a very different plan for their disposable income. Activating their lobbyists in Washington, building grassroots movements to march on their behalf, and using their media properties to run experiments on human credulity. Rendezvous with Oblivion is the
The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. So it turns out back in November, the spy agencies in the United States were notifying the Trump administration that something's going on in China. Looks like another SARS outbreak. Maybe we should get ready for this. It was ignored. I've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for the supporters of our program that basically goes through the whole timeline. All the way from, actually going back to 2018 when Trump disbanded 3 different anti-pandemic agencies in the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Council, and the executive branch. Just closed them down, fired the people. That was the end of that. How he ignored the intelligence in November, he ignored the intelligence in December, he ignored the epidemic now coming into the United States in January, he ignored it in February, just going the blow-by-blow timeline. And I think it's really worth having it all in one place, a good recap, a good summary of this that you can refer to and you can share with your friends. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. Denise in Calumet, Michigan. Hey, Denise, what's on your mind today?
Well, can you believe that the Trump campaign has already put out a lawsuit to halt the voting in Michigan? That doesn't make sense because he's behind.
Yeah.
So if you halt...
What he knows is that most of the mail-in ballots, or most of the ballots that have not yet been counted, are coming out of the Detroit area, out of Wayne County and Macomb County, and they're going to be 70-80% for Biden. So he's trying to minimize the margin of victory. I don't think he's going to succeed with this, Denise.
Oh, I hope not. And Gary Peters has to win, too. I'm petrified.
Yeah.
But thanks
I'm
for
with
all you do.
Gary, thank you, Denise. Yeah, I'm concerned about Gary Peters, too. He's a really good guy and an important member of the Senate, and I sure hope he can hang on. Thank you for the call. Kent in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Hey, Kent, what's up?
Hey, first of all, I used to live in West Wazoo, so take it a little easy there.
Okay.
Anyway, I had a question for you. Let's assume that everything goes the way it's trending right now and that Pelosi keeps speakership and McConnell keeps the Senate, but Biden gets elected president. Do you see any hope to retain the Affordable Care Act?
Well, if the Supreme Court strikes it down, no. I mean, that's going to be the big thing. Those arguments are going to be held next week before the Supreme Court, and we'll probably hear the results in January, February. It might be a blessing in disguise, though, Kent. If the Supreme Court strikes down the Affordable Care Act, and now that Amy Coney Barrett is on the court, that becomes a probability rather than a possibility. If they do that, then the question that's going to confront America is, okay, what replaces this? And if the Republicans retain control over the Senate, it's going to be more difficult. But in fact, it's going to be very difficult. But I think that the pressure for something like Medicare for all, or at least the public option, Pete Buttigieg used to call it Medicare for anybody who wants it. Obama campaigned on it in 2008. I think that becomes highly probable. So, I'm not real flipped out about, minor or momentary or step-by-step right-wing victories when I think the larger trend is progressive across the country. So, I think that's something that might actually work to our advantage. Thanks for the call, Ken. Maverick in Edmonds, Washington. Hey, Maverick, what's up?
Hey, hi, Tom, and greetings to you and your listeners from the Pacific Northwest. You talked quite frequently, you talk frequently about the Democrats and and I hope you can hear me, I got a new Bluetooth, but
sure.
The Democrats and their lack of capitalizing on effective messaging. And I want to tie a line from that to what you said earlier, which I think was the first time I've heard you say it, about not promoting the numbers that your show gets. And I can relate to this because for a long handful of years, I worked in radio, and at one point I had a 1/3 share. And what that means to non-radio people is at any given time there was, well, it was in a small town, so that's why. Otherwise, in a big town like Seattle, that's unheard of.
Yeah,
anyway,
that means a third of the people listening to radio are listening to you.
Right. So I couldn't hide out anywhere. And this was my first full-time radio gig at a rock station in central Washington State. And there was all these old guys that were at this little cluster of stations, and they were so full of themselves that I actually heard one of them say at one point who wasn't taking care of him properly, "Don't you know who I am?" And I'm in my late 20s, early 30s rather, and I'm thinking, you're a schmuck in the middle of nowhere. It's not going anywhere. You're nobody special. And I saw how this media exposure turned people into egomaniacs, and I immediately said, that is not going to be me. So I, like a knucklehead, went the other way and overdid it and really tried to hide out and didn't promote myself, at all, or I found it uncomfortable to promote myself. So to wrap this up, I think, I respect you for being chagrined to talk about yourself. I know you don't like people that give you lots of compliments. That's not what the show's about. It's not about, you. It's about topics and truth and information. And that's a good thing. That shows that you're a good person with your ego in check. But I don't see anything wrong with, using an occasional promotion, one of the arrows in your quiver, not the whole quiver, of saying, the America's number one progressive talk radio show with, 10 million listeners daily or something like that. There's nothing wrong with doing that a little bit, If you go nuts, it's no good. But I think you're missing out on an opportunity if you don't promote it.
It may be. There's also part of me that's afraid of jinxing things.
Life doesn't work that way. That doesn't work.
No, I know. I know, Maverick. I understand. And I think that there's a larger. I'd like to put this in a larger frame, though. And as an old radio guy, I'd love to get your response to this. And that is that one of the real benefits. One of the real benefits that the right-wing radio sphere has, when the White House holds their twice-a-year talk radio events that I'm not even invited to anymore. I used to be invited to them when George Bush did them. Barack Obama stopped them, by the way, for 8 years. But during the Bush administration, twice a year, 100 or so talk show hosts from around the country had come to the White House. And now during the Trump administration, they've been doing the same thing. And the president walks around and talks to all the hosts. And there's literally, over 100 right-wing talk show hosts local all over the country. That's the farm team. Those are the people who are learning how to do talk radio. And tragically, there's a lot of lefties who would love to do a radio show. They don't even understand what talk radio is. They think that doing good radio means doing NPR, basically, interviewing experts and offering, long, dry, detailed explanations of how things are or whatever. And they don't realize that the core of talk radio is community. It's establishing a community of listeners who have built a relationship, not just with the host, but with each other. And Rush Limbaugh got this right away. It's because he started in radio at the same time I did. We both started in radio in like 68. And in fact, I started in radio in must have been 67, because I was, whatever the year was, I was 15 years old. That was 67. So, this is no, that would have been 66. And I understood it because I'd been in radio. I'd worked in radio for a decade back in the 60s and 70s. And it's so sad to me. Occasionally I'll be on the show of, progressive shows that are around the country. And basically they invite me to take over their show. Here's the expert, Thom Hartmann. Let's talk about your new book about monopolies or whatever it may be. And boom, I'm taking over their show. And it shouldn't be that way. They should be building a relationship with their listeners and their callers. But we have no farm team because there's basically very, very few local stations around the country anymore. And so, and progressives, for some reason, think that effective talk radio is not actually talk radio, that it's actually, public broadcasting kind of stuff. And that's boring. There's a reason why PBS gets crappy ratings and nobody watches it. The NPR does pretty good, but they're basically the only source of news out there on the radio any longer. But anyway, I think that we really need to be training a new generation of young people to be, future progressive talk show hosts. I don't know how to do that, but I think that, we need stations like KBCS is there you're calling from. So what are your thoughts, Maverick?
It was my first job. I had a late night blues show on KBCS once a week where I actually shut the transmitter down at 1 o'clock in the morning. And let me tell you, that's a really lonely feeling to push a button and then hear nothing but static. But that launched me, and it was that's one of the things why I've been listening to your show for 5.5 or 6 years is because it really does have there's a sense of community. There's you got regular callers and there are people that I think like Morris and Kenyatta and I don't want to leave anybody out, but there's a whole bunch of people that are like, and Paul in Woodinville, who's close to me, I would love to have lunch with these guys, and I look forward to hearing them on the show and on the program because they add content, and that's what your program does. Is it adds content. Well, speaking personally to my life. But I doubt that anybody listening would disagree with that strongly. So thank you for what you do. I think you're just fine if you promote yourself a little bit in that way, and I say go for it and keep the pedal to the metal.
Audio and video archive.
Thank you, Maverick. Thank you, Maverick. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Scott in Burien, Washington, watching Free Speech TV. Hey, Scott, what's up?
Hey, Tom, let me take you off speakerphone. You still there? Cool.
Yeah.
Hello? Okay. Yeah.
Although normally when people say that, I put them on hold, but I'll cut you some slack, Scott. I think you're a first-time caller. What's up?
Sorry about that. I know I'm speaking hypotheticals here, but what do you say to those that say that they would have probably rather have the Senate for Democrats and Trump keeping 4 more years?
Well, if the Democrats had taken the Senate, Trump would not keep 4 more years because he would be impeached and removed from office. There's no doubt in my mind about that. It's sort of like, would you rather be shot or hanged? I'd like to have the Senate and the House and the White House, and the House. But I don't know how to respond to it, Scott. It's just is there a larger issue involved? Was there a therefore to your question, or was it just that point of curiosity?
Well, because basically you saw how McConnell treated Obama during the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It's probably just going to be a repeat of that. And plus, as far as trying to even out the Supreme Court, that would be a total non-starter if McConnell's still going to be the, Senate Majority Leader and Republicans still having the Senate. So that's why I asked it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's, I'm back to do you want to be shot or hanged? It's bad either way. The Republicans have become so toxic. They have become so addicted to money from billionaires and right-wing foundations, and they've become so enamored of their own racism and their own embrace of lies like there is no such thing as climate change, that they're actually, a force that I think is equivalent to something that you might call evil. And that troubles me tremendously. Scott, thanks for the call. John in Oakland, California. Hey, John, what's up?
Oh, hey, Tom. For those who are still knuckle biting over Arizona and what the GOP is saying, got this from the Arizona Republic, who has surveyed all the recorders and said that there are actually 600,000 ballots to be counted, but 450,000 of those are from Maricopa in Phoenix. So I think that pretty much puts to rest those concerns.
The cake is baked.
Exactly so. Now comes the taking and eating it. But I think we're sitting well. Only ABC has not called Wisconsin. Everyone else has called it, and the recent votes out of Michigan show that it's expanding the Biden lead. So,
and it will, and Pennsylvania as well.
I just wanted to share that.
There's still, well, thank you, John. I mean, there's still a million uncounted votes in Pennsylvania. They're not going to have a final vote count until Friday. Michigan will probably not have a final vote count until tomorrow. Wisconsin, has been called, actually. CNN called it for Biden just a few minutes ago, about a half hour ago. So, we're on the way, John. We're on the way, and Trump is on his way out. John, I got to run, but thank you so much for the call. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, talk media for the sane among us. Stick around. We'll be back. On the Science Revolution this week, how a Green New Deal could save hundreds of thousands of lives. Also, Dr. Justin Frank submitted an amicus brief to the Supreme Court on Bush v. Gore and is talking about psychoanalytic and family dynamic perspective in that context. I weigh in on how the GOP is an organized gang of sociopaths. Meet the 14-year-old climate activist, Haven Coleman. She'll be discussing how youth climate activists are leading the push for climate action in the Democratic Party and why they believe voting for climate in 2020 is so critical. And in Geeky Science, why healthcare for all is a climate solution. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. David in Chicago. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Mr. Hartmann. Thanks for taking my call. Sure. Back in around 1:45, you had mentioned about recruiting or training a new generation of progressive talk radio personalities.
Yes.
I'd like to tap you for that. How can I get a hold of you to ask for your mentorship on that?
You know, I wrote an op-ed about this back 10 years ago, David, about how to do good talk radio. I should reprise it. If you send me a tweet specifically to me, Thom_Hartmann, I will reply to you with a link to it. I can't find it right now. I'm not available for mentorships like that right now, but I think that you'll find that most of what you need, most of the information you need is right in there. And you don't need to necessarily start in radio. I mean, you can start with podcasts and things. There's lots of opportunities and lots of ways to do it. But David, good on you. I'm really glad to hear that there are people who want to do that. And just drop me a note on Twitter and we'll talk about it. Karen in Bennington, Vermont. Hey, Karen, what's on your mind?
Hi, I'm really nervous. I've never called, but I've got to tell you about this story that's going around the right-wing sites. It just came out the last day of October, and this is regarding could the Republicans have been planning all along to have most Democrats vote by mail because they're afraid of catching COVID, and therefore Republican votes would be counted because they vote on the day. The story that's going around is dead Democrats. There's a voter fraud scheme registering dead Democrats uncovered in Florida. Now, 54 applications were sent in by the same person with the same handwriting from a resident in South Carolina. Out of all of them, most were picked up by the election officials. 3 got through when they were added to the rolls. But the person that sent all these in did not request mail-in ballots. They were trying to get IDs, apparently. Now, who's going to use an ID for one of the ladies that did get through and put on the roll was a 104-year-old woman who recently died in Naples.
Right.
Now, who's going to impersonate her to vote in person?
Yeah, this is where, you remember when Trump said, go out and vote twice? He said, vote in the election and then, send in your mail-in ballot as well. And he was basically encouraging people to commit election fraud. My guess is that this was probably a right-winger who was doing this, thinking that they'd be the next James O'Keefe, and they were going to, punk the elections officials and say, hey, look at this, I got a bunch of dead people registered. All right, a hero. Not realizing that they're committing a crime. But, this is not the kind of thing that normal people do, number one. Number two, there's a lot of dead people on voter registration rolls all over the country. When you die, somebody doesn't immediately call up the local election bureau. But the fact of the matter is dead people don't vote. So it doesn't matter if it takes a year or 2 years or 3 years for a state to figure out that Joe Blow died. He's not voting. He's dead. So am I making sense, Karen?
But I think they did it just so that they could go report it and discredit the voting system. Because this occurred back in June and July, and the story only came out October 31st.
Oh, so they thought it would be an October surprise kind of thing. The currency that these guys trade in, Karen.
Yeah, the IDs were sent to this one address in Florida, and the person, when they received them, took them, of course, to a Republican.
Well, wait a minute. When you register to vote, you don't get an ID. You get a voter registration card. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's different variations on this story. They wanted to be registered, and the person received, somebody in Florida, in Davie, Florida, received 3 of the IDs for the dead people.
Yeah.
The 3 that were added to the rolls and then issued an ID.
I guarantee you. Karen, I guarantee you it's a right-wing scam. And thank you for pointing it out. I mean, this is the currency that these guys trade in. No, you're absolutely right. The currency that these guys trade in is outrage. That's what they sell. And, you know, and this is just an attempt to get more of that currency. Karen, thank you so much for the call. It's great to have a first-time caller. I really appreciate it. I got to move along to the next caller now, but thank you for the call. Nicole in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Hey, Nicole, you get the last call of the day. We have a minute to go. What's up?
Oh, okay, great. What I was going to say about Latino voters, I'll give you an example of my cousin. He voted for Trump. And I said, why would you vote for Trump? And you have, like, brothers and sisters that are Mexican, you know, and he's Puerto Rican and I'm Puerto Rican. They're half brothers. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, what would you think would happen if all those people would come across the border? They would ruin our country. So what I'm saying is they pit us against each other.
That was my point earlier, is in the 50s, the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, Republicans were telling white voters, black people are coming for your jobs. Then in the 80s and 90s, they started saying to black voters, Hispanic people are coming for your jobs. And now they're saying to Hispanic voters, those undocumented Hispanics from south of the border are coming for your job. And I mean, they've been doing this. Look out for those people. They want your job. The other thing that they used to sell to white men was women are coming for your job. Right? And it's always been BS. Nobody's coming for your job, except maybe China. And that's because billionaires are shipping your jobs offshore. Nicole, thank you. Thank you. That was a great point to end the day on. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. It's built into, it's why it's called democracy. So get out there, get active. The heavy work is actually just about to begin. The election is just the setup. Now we've got some serious work to do. So tag You're It. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Tom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code Tom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Tom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Tom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Tom.